Good evening. The time is now 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, and this public meeting of the D.C. State Board of Education will come to order. I'm Frazier O'Leary. I'm the Vice President of the Board. President Thompson will be here momentarily. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Director Butler, please call the roll.
Michaela Kelly, Joseph Villaflor, Taya Washington, Benjamin Yarkin, Ben Williams, Alistair Chang,
Present.
Eric Goulet, Dr. Frazier O'Leary,
Here.
Dr. Robert Henderson,
Present.
Brandon Best,
Present.
Ebony Rose Thompson, Dr. Carlene Reed, Dr. Jacques Patterson. Vice President O'Leary, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. Are there corrections or additions to the agenda?
I'd like to move that we remove SR-12 from the agenda.
Okay. I was going to wait for President Thompson to get here. The motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I'll say that we're in this situation because the State Board does not have independence in our budget process, and I think that we should.
Okay, with no more discussion, we need to vote on it. Director Butler, can you call the roll? I will pass the mic to President Thompson.
Representative Yarkin, Representative Williams, Representative Chang, Representative Goulet, Vice President O'Leary,
Aye.
Representative Henderson,
Aye.
Representative Best,
Aye.
President Thompson,
Aye.
Representative Reed,
Aye.
Representative Patterson. Ayes have it, motion passed.
All right. Thank you, Vice President O'Leary, for starting the meeting, and thank you, members and viewing public, for your grace. All right. Vice President O'Leary hastily passed the mic to me. So now that we have, do we need to approve the agenda? Did you already approve the agenda? All right, we've only done the removal. All right, so members, I'm going to now ask for a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, perfect. Motion carries. Good evening. My name is Ebony Rose Thompson. I'm the Ward 7 representative and president of the State Board. On behalf of the D.C. State Board of Education and its members, I want to welcome our guests and the viewing public to our public meeting. The State Board plans to continue this in-person posture for public meetings. The board holds its regularly scheduled public meetings on the third Wednesday of every month at the Old Council Chambers at 441 4th Street Northwest. The meeting is being broadcast live via the District Knowledge Network. Before I share updates and discuss the items on this evening's agenda, I would first like to congratulate and welcome our newly appointed student representatives to their first meeting. So I have Ben Yarkin to my far left. I believe Representative Joseph Villaflor will be joining us shortly. I know Representative Kelly couldn't make it tonight, but we will see her at future meetings. We also have Taya Washington, who is returning as a student representative. Taya has a really good reason for being absent. She is currently at the Aurora Institute Symposium in lovely Palm Springs, California. So we are jealous, giving a presentation on elevating emotional wellness in adolescents and representing the state board. In addition to swearing in our student representatives this past month, the state board members also participated in a collaborative breakfast meeting with the DC Council. On behalf of the state board, I want to thank Chairman Mendelson for his partnership in planning and leading the breakfast. I'd also like to thank the Secretary's Office of the Council for all the work that they put in to make that happen, and our staff. It was a fruitful discussion that led to more positive outcomes, that will lead to more positive outcomes for students in the District of Columbia. This evening, even though I see more than 9 people in the chamber, I believe the state board has 9 public witnesses signed up to testify. We look forward to hearing from you as you share your testimony. We encourage the public to sign up every month to share testimony. As a reminder, sign up closes 48 hours before the public meeting, and the link can be found on our website at www.sboe.dc.gov. Our next public meeting of the state board will be held next month. That is Wednesday, November 15th. At this time, I'm going to turn to our state superintendent, Dr. Christina Grant, for her remarks.
Thank you, President Thompson. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, President Thompson again, Vice President O'Leary, and members of the State Board of Education. And I echo that it is excited to be joined by our new members. And so, good evening and welcome, Representative Yarkin, and a virtual hello to Representatives Washington, Villaflor, and Kelly. We have a special affinity for our student representatives, and so I am excited to be on this leadership journey with you all. You're the reason why we do the work, and it is truly exciting to see how you all push us in the work. Ask Tia how that played out last year. Happy October. If you've noticed the chill in the air, fall is here. It is my favorite season. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to provide you all with updates on some of our shared priorities, and I am particularly pleased that you will be having a conversation about our task force recommendations this evening, as I smile at Representative Chang. In 2022, OSSE was pleased to coordinate with Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Pinto to establish the Early Literacy Task Force for the District of Columbia. We began to convene the task force in the fall of 2022. We brought together stakeholders from across the district and government and our schools to discuss the best ways to support early literacy in the district and to draft recommendations to effectuate needed changes. Representative Chang sat diligently on this task force and was instrumental in its structure and ensuring its success. On Friday, I had the opportunity to join a panel at DC Prep with Representative Chang, Deputy Mayor Kine, Chancellor Farabee, and Director Walker Davis. We answered questions from DCPS's literacy specialist, Janelle Bryant. It was a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate the coherence and support of DC's education landscape for structured literacy, something that I do not take for granted, considering the vantage point that exists in other jurisdictions. The task force is answering Council's charge, produced 4 primary recommendations. First, it recommended that all educators responsible for teaching students foundational reading skills must demonstrate mastery of structured literacy concepts by completing a high-quality training or passing an assessment. Second, the task force recommended that administrators who are responsible for evaluating and supporting these teachers must also demonstrate their mastery of structured literacy instruction. Third, to provide on-the-job support to district educators, the task force recommended that OSSE create a universal feedback tool and stand up direct coaching through a pilot program. Finally, the task force addressed the issue of classroom curricula. Using transparency and expert research to drive these improvements, the task force recommended that OSSE publish a list of high-quality instructional materials rooted in the science of reading, alongside a list of what curricular LEAs are using to teach reading. I'm proud of the work of the task force, primarily because I was a literacy specialist, and I believe that the recommendations contained in the report will provide a foundation upon which DC can build a national model for literacy instruction. As you and your panelists discuss these recommendations this evening, I leave you with this parting thought. I'm eager to hear thoughts on how to further refine the recommendations. To be truly effective, they must be implemented in combination, not in isolation. Improved instructional materials will not improve literacy instruction. Improved training and coaching will not alone improve literacy instruction. To build on the district's progress in ELA achievement in 2023, we must simultaneously ensure that our students have access to the best instructional materials, the best trained teachers, and supportive, knowledgeable administrators and coaches. If we accomplish these objectives, we will certainly move the needle on early literacy in the District of Columbia. Turning now to the DC School Report Card, I'm pleased that OSSI and the State Board have finalized dates for co-hosting 3 engagement sessions, October 30th, November 13th, and December 4th. We made the decision to co-host public engagement meetings to maximize efficiency and help ensure that we're both hearing from the broadest array of stakeholders. I do remain optimistic about our collective ability to jointly plan and host these engagement opportunities. These sessions build upon our currently available public survey on the DC Report Card. The Report Card is an online platform for families and community members to learn about school-level performance. In September, OSSI and the State Board worked together to create a feedback survey on how to improve the DC School Report Card for district families. If you haven't already, I encourage everyone listening to complete the survey, and please encourage your friends and neighbors to complete it as well. Your feedback is instrumental and will inform the next iteration of the DC School Report Card. In addition, we do hope as many community members as possible attend the upcoming engagement session at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library on October 30th at 5:30 p.m. We will be discussing what information should be included on the DC School Report Card website. Subsequently, on November 13th, we will co-host an online public engagement forum to discuss how best to display and contextualize schools' summative scores. These scores, which are calculated using comparable, reliable measures such as assessment score growth, graduation rates, and attendance, through a formula agreed to by the State Board, provide a simplistic but easy to understand snapshot of school performance. These scores, which OSSI is required to calculate under federal law, inform our school support designations. We look forward to hearing from community members about where and how to display this information. Then on December 4th, we will co-host an engagement session on the overall visual display of information on the report card website, including what tools or features will be most helpful for families in comparing different schools. OSSI has produced and is distributing a flyer with information on the 3 engagement sessions and how to complete the online survey. We would love your continued support with distribution to encourage community participation from families in all 8 wards of Washington, D.C. Establishing and updating learning standards for DC students is among OSSI's most important work with the State Board of Education. This spring, we are able to establish first in the nation menstrual health standards and create the most forward-looking social studies standards in the country. Building upon this work, OSSI recently concluded a working group with the State Board of Education to standardize the process and cadence for reviewing and drafting academic standards. We appreciate the State Board's collaboration on this work and look forward to its advancement. As State Board members know, OSSI is currently drafting financial literacy standards. In fact, we began soliciting feedback from financial literacy experts this week. We look forward to soliciting additional feedback from the public and members of the State Board, particularly the student representatives, in the coming months. Also, on the horizon are social emotional learning standards and artificial intelligence. I'm excited to develop social emotional learning standards, as successful navigation of interpersonal relationships is vital to children's development and lifelong success. While we are still very much in the incubation stage on AI, I know that the State Board's State Level and Systemic Policy Committee will host a roundtable discussion on AI in November. I look forward to learning more about the roundtable discussion, who will attend, and how this discussion can help us move forward together. AI is obviously having and will continue to have a tremendous impact on our society, including on education. We look forward to learning more, partnering more, and leaning into this space and helping our schools ethically and successfully navigate this increasingly technology-rich environment. Finally, I would like to thank the board for bringing forth a resolution celebrating the Charles Sumner School and its 150th anniversary. The Sumner School building is a remarkable space, and if you have not gone, if you have not taken your students to go, please go visit. The history contained in the museum and its archives are even more remarkable. From Thomas Jefferson's meeting minutes to Marvin Gaye's classroom photos, the Summer School houses truly important items related to DC's education sector, history, and Black history in general. It was wonderful to see so many board meetings at the 150th anniversary celebration last month, and I appreciate you truly for putting forth the resolution and joining history, as we will keep the resolution in our archives. Last, I do have to say hello to President Lyons. So good to see you. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful evening.
I want to thank Dr. Grant for joining us this evening and all the evenings. We appreciate OSSI's continued partnership on so many policy issues of importance to our students and schools. Tonight's panel, as Dr. Grant alluded, will highlight the Early Literacy Education Task Force report. Their testimony will provide insights about the recommendations and findings for structured literacy instruction in the District of Columbia. The State Board was proud to participate in the task force, along with other education stakeholders from across the district. We are looking forward to hearing from Helen Baer, Director of the DC Reading Clinic, Alice McNeil, ESL teacher, Garfield Elementary School, Kate Noonan, ELA instructional coach, Garrison Elementary School. I ask you all to please come to the table now. As you all are approaching, I will share. Each of you have up to 5 minutes, and then we will move to one round of questions from the State Board. We will begin with Ms. Baer. Ms. Baer, you are welcome to start when you are ready. Friendly reminder to speak into the microphone. I'm glad we're up to 2, but please speak into the microphone when you're talking. Thank you.
Is this, oh, that seems loud. Is this okay? Okay. All right. Dear State Board of Education representatives, thank you for inviting me to testify tonight regarding early literacy. I'm Dr. Helen Baer, and I direct the DC Reading Clinic. As part of DCPS, we provide educators with professional development and embedded coaching so they can implement research-based structured literacy instruction to readers learning to decode. To date, over 400 teachers have completed the semester-long Reading Clinic program, and we currently have another 75 teachers who will complete the training this year. All members of the Early Literacy Task Force, including my colleagues, Dr. Shireen Fernandez and Sherry Jones, are united in striving for the same goals as my team and the DC teachers that I am fortunate to work with every day. We are enthusiastic about the knowledge, skills, and practice that we know will ensure all children in the city learn to read and do so with joy. From my vantage point at the DC Reading Clinic, I appreciate that the task force's report provides LEA's flexibility in demonstrating competency in structured literacy, including through prior training completion. It's essential to acknowledge that we already have hundreds of exemplary reading teachers in our district, many of whom are alumni of the clinic or who have served as our mentor teachers. Some people to my right are in that category. These educators have been an instrumental part of the driving force that has put DCPS on the map for early literacy outcomes. What we know and what I see firsthand is that we are undergoing, both in DC and nationally, a process of unlearning and relearning. This unlearning of literacy practice is necessary for us to move forward in our classrooms and as a city as a whole. At the clinic, we believe that this shift requires 3 things: content knowledge, coaching, and relationships with people who will support them in this often emotional change from old practices to those that are aligned with research and evidence. At the clinic, we have seen statistically significant results for our teachers and their students, even when compared to their peers with similar demographics and in similar schools. We start with the relationships with our teachers, ensuring that they feel safe, asking questions, and sharing openly with what they thought they knew about literacy and learning to read. We help them understand that whatever they did before, what they may have learned in their graduate schools of education, it's not their fault if it wasn't working or it wasn't best practice. In many cases, it's all they ever knew. We then explicitly and systematically teach content knowledge about why learning to read is based on oral language and what cognitive scientists have uncovered about the brain and why some brains struggle to read. We ensure they know all the sounds of our language, the nuances of phonics, and the assets that students bring to school in the form of their home languages and dialects. We include the significance of vocabulary, background knowledge, and what reading comprehension truly means. But we don't stop with just this content. It's one thing to know the content and quite another to know how to use it. We model giving diagnostic assessments, sit side by side to analyze student data and create lesson plans. We model and coach on the instruction of those lesson plans, knowing that these practices take time to incorporate and adjust to. We answer questions along the way and provide just-in-time feedback as teachers are trying on new practices. At the DC Reading Clinic, we know that we offer exceptional content development, but we hold firm to our belief and the evidence that we have that coaching and mentorship are what ensures that change really takes hold in schools. Shifting practice takes that feedback and opportunities to try new techniques in a safe space. The Reading Clinic program, while not a fit for every teacher, has been proven to be incredibly effective for our teachers and their students. And I'll conclude by saying that I'm really excited for the future work of the clinic that will include work with teachers of older students. I appreciate very much that the recommendations include K-12 special educators and K-5 reading specialists. We know that while we strive to meet all students' needs early, especially with screening and intervention, we have not caught all students as early as we need to. So I believe the next big push for structured literacy in our district is in ensuring that we have teachers that are well equipped to meet the needs of our older students in every school. In the coming year, the DC Reading Clinic will be hiring a full-time staff person to develop a middle school program and provide the in-depth training and coaching that we have been offering to elementary educators for years. We've already begun to pilot our materials and resources with middle school students and teachers and have seen already some incredible impact in this area. We are excited to be able to support the task force recommendations in this way and look forward to our continued literacy growth across the city.
Let me know when I should start. Okay. I'm Alice McNeil, a language acquisition teacher with DCPS in Ward 5 and previously a reading specialist in Ward 8. I'm excited to be here to speak about my experience in training with structured literacy in DC. I'm an alum and former mentor for the DC Reading Clinic, and last spring completed the 2-year Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling Letters training offered through OSSI. The training I received through the DC Reading Clinic, as well as through Letters, was incredibly valuable, and what I've learned from this coursework, I've been able to implement to better support my students. However valuable, this training is not accessible or realistic for everyone. It is necessary that we implement the recommendations put forth by the Early Literacy Task Force to create ongoing training and non-punitive support for elementary teachers. There are 4 recommendations put forth in the final recommendations from the Early Literacy Task Force. I'm going to speak to 2 of the recommendations that I believe would best support DC educators and thus our students. Recommendation 2. The task force recommends that DC mandate specialized structured literacy training for school-based administrators who are responsible for evaluating or supporting K-5 teachers and instructional coaches working in public elementary schools across DCPS and DC public charter schools. And recommendation 3, to provide on-the-job support to educators working in public elementary schools. The task force recommends that OSSI develop a walkthrough structured literacy tool and pilot direct coaching support. Structured literacy is necessary. When implemented correctly, science-based reading instruction has the ability to reach 95 to 97% of children. While I do not believe test scores give the full picture of my students' learning, as of right now, that's how we're measuring reading proficiency. The 2023 PARCC scores indicate that 33.6% of district students are meeting or exceeding expectations in ELA. While this is an increase, it's still unacceptable. We are the nation's capital. Our public schools should set the bar for excellence. Literacy is a civil right. The consequences associated with not being able to read are life-altering. Children who are unable to read proficiently by 4th grade tend to experience much lower educational outcomes. In the general population, about 15 to 20% of people are dyslexic. However, it is estimated that nearly 50% of those in prison are dyslexic, and roughly 80% of prisoners are functionally illiterate. We must break the illiteracy to prison pipeline. I mentioned in my introduction that I completed both the DC Reading Clinic and letters training offered through OSSE. I know firsthand that these opportunities have greatly impacted me as an educator and, most importantly, benefited my students. However, these trainings are not realistic for most educators. While valuable, they require an extensive time commitment. While completing the training through the DC Reading Clinic, I committed to 3 afternoons or evenings per week at the actual clinic, 2 afternoons working with one-on-one with my student and 1 evening course, as well as additional hours to complete the coursework and plan lessons for my student. Letters training was a 2-year commitment, with essentially monthly live 6-hour training sessions plus asynchronous learning, roughly another 6 hours per unit, of which there are 8 total, in bridge to practice activities. Put more clearly, in addition to my full-time responsibilities teaching at school from 8 to 3:30, as well as lesson planning, which often happens outside of school hours, I spent an additional 6 hours or more weekly on additional coursework and professional development. The vast majority of educators are unable to take on this significant time commitment while working full-time. The district has clearly stated that using evidence-based instruction is a priority, in creating an innovative pilot coaching program and the development of a tool that will enable regular feedback for structured literacy classroom instruction that takes place during the school day, per recommendation 3, would make ongoing high-quality training in structured literacy a reality. Thank you to the Early Literacy Task Force for putting together these strong recommendations, and thank you for listening.
President Thompson, Vice President O'Leary, and esteemed members of the State Board. My name is Kate Noonan, and I'm an instructional coach in DC Public Schools, coaching reading teachers at Garrison Elementary in Ward 2. I'm a local and a national letters professional learning facilitator, and I work closely with the DCPS Office of Elementary Schools on special projects related to early literacy, most notably the training and development of coaches, administrators, and teachers in reading science and structured literacy methods. I'm testifying today as an individual who has led my school and other schools through the shift to structured literacy. And so I'm honored to be here tonight to discuss what is needed to implement the Early Literacy Task Force's recommendations. I want to begin by sharing praise and gratitude for the work of the Early Literacy Task Force. As a contributor to DC's Comprehensive Literacy Plan, and with my school, Garrison Elementary, being one of the earliest adopters of a whole school structured literacy model, it has been thrilling for me to witness the progress made toward the goals outlined in the plan over the past few years. Implementation of the task force's recommendations will be a big step toward ensuring stronger, more equitable literacy outcomes for all of DC students. The goals of the recommendations are essentially to ensure that teachers and leaders in our schools have the requisite knowledge, skills, and curricula to provide instruction grounded in the science of reading. As this body is well aware, there is a disconnect between research and the training that many educators have received in their studies and job preparation. The Early Literacy Task Force was spot on in their recommendation that DC educators must have access to structured literacy training, on-the-job support, and high-quality instructional materials. And in my testimony tonight, I want to briefly lay out some of the ways that these recommendations could be implemented, and also describe the support required if they were to be implemented with fidelity. Task Force recommendations 1 and 2 focus on training, and I agree with my panelists that there is no doubt that high-quality training is a critical step in structured literacy implementation. There is no shortcut or substitute for teacher knowledge or skill when it comes to teaching reading. But it's also true that a training mandate, even when phased over 4 years, could feel burdensome to schools in terms of cost and time, especially for overworked teachers. My school was the first DCPS school to have all K-5 reading teachers trained in letters, national gold standard for professional learning and reading science. And many leaders ask me, how did you get your teachers on board? How did you get them to buy in? I admit at first that these practices did feel a bit wonky, but I quickly learned that with the knowledge came the buy-in. And so access to this high-quality training is absolutely the right first step. The task force is right in not mandating a specific program or course of study, allowing LEAs instead to choose from a list of among approved vendors. And so I urge the agencies involved in curating this list to keep the standards high and to defer to already established accreditation models that are aligned to national knowledge and practice standards. It's also imperative that high-quality, free options be available to LEAs that might not have the funds available to purchase training from an approved vendor. This could be achieved by things like expanding the OSSE stipends for DC educators to complete letters, by allocating funding to continue development of OSSE Science of Reading course, by prioritizing the training of school-based coaches who can then scale and turnkey training for their staff at no cost during the school day. The third task force recommendation is for OSSE to develop a pilot program for literacy coaches. I've witnessed the power and influence of coaching on reading achievement through countless examples working in DCPS. When I think of a school that is getting it right, in every example, I can point to a knowledgeable coach or administrator who is guiding their teachers' practice on the ground. Models similar to this proposed pilot already exist in DC, and OSSE should look to them for guidance when developing their coaching pilot. I also urge OSSE to consider implementing a variation of Recommendation 3, which is to pilot a train-the-trainer model, where in this scenario, skilled district-level coaches work with small cohorts of building-level coaches or administrators. Imagine how quickly learning can be scaled in that way. A district coach trains school-based coaches who then turnkey learning for their staff during the school day. In this way, one district coach professionally develops small groups of coaches who can then train dozens and dozens of teachers who go on to influence the literacy outcomes of hundreds of children. Bottom line, coaching support is a necessary counterpart to knowledge, and so Recommendation 3 must be implemented in conjunction with the other two training requirements. Thank you for allowing me to briefly weigh in on the Early Literacy Task Force recommendations. System-level change is never easy, but this is a strong roadmap for success. And I urge this body and all DC educational agencies to advocate for and support OSSE in implementation of these recommendations. When we know better, we can do better, and our children are counting on us to get this right.
We don't often get applause in the chamber, but I like it. So I'm going to turn to Director Butler shortly to call the round of member questions. Each member has 3 minutes. This is the same friendly reminder as always, that the 3 minutes does both include time to ask and answer the question. So I'm going to turn to Director Butler.
Thank you. Representative Yarkin, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Representative Villaflor, do you have any questions? Representative Henderson.
Thank you all for testifying. I have a couple questions. First, to anybody, how does all this apply to multilingual learners?
I can speak to that. I'm a language acquisition teacher. So structured literacy is basically a way to say literacy that's backed by scientific research, and there is an abundance of research on multilingual learners. Some of the ways that you need to deliver the instruction in terms of vocabulary, having more of a front basis with your foundational literacy needs to be there, but it's definitely applicable, and studies have shown that it benefits our multilingual learners.
So is there additional training that needs to happen for those teachers?
I think that, did you want to talk to it? I think that good teaching is good teaching, and when you're able to see where more support is needed, like in terms of vocabulary, there could be someone that speaks English at home but maybe doesn't have a high vocabulary. It would be something similar, like really thinking about using data to find out where are the gaps, and then being the teacher being the expert in terms of filling those gaps and supporting them.
I'll just add that to speak to Kate's point about there are programs that were established that have standards, and those that we know that multilingual learners do need some of these great practices around structured literacy that Alice is mentioning. But anything that's in line with the International Dyslexia Association standards for knowledge and practice of skills will include specific content around language learners. We know that those are students who are in every classroom, and so they should be part of what everybody is receiving in terms of instruction in this area.
Thank you. Another question, Dr. Baer, you mentioned looking at middle school and people that have been missed. Is there also opportunity to look on the other end? Is there another push that needs to happen for pre-K, the pre-K end of this?
That's a question that I get sort of sometimes from our teachers of younger students. I think the screening is best validated starting in kindergarten. There are certainly things that we can do in terms of prevention starting younger, but the best practice for screening starts at kindergarten. And I do not, I don't know that I necessarily see that like right now that is where we should push in terms of, I would instead think that we should just continue the work that we're doing in
So
K-2.
that's for screening for dyslexia?
Yes.
Okay, but in terms of like structured literacy, like are there any elements that pre-K teachers should be incorporating?
Yes, and they do, and the trainings that we have been discussing are certainly applicable in many cases to pre-K teachers.
All right, thank you. And one last thing, Ms. Noonan, so your school has adopted this wholesale. Are you seeing improved outcomes for your students?
Yeah, absolutely. Garrison Elementary had some of the highest ELA Park growth, a growth of 10 percentage points in levels 4 and 5 this past year. We've had some of the highest DIBELS growth, DIBELS being our early literacy screener in past years. And our school is looked to as a model for DCPS. We've actually coached and run like learning walks and observation sites where every DCPS elementary school principal and coach have come and toured our structured literacy program and talked to us about implementation and the different enabling conditions that have set us up for success with structured literacy in K-2, and then of course alignment to reading science in our upper grades as well.
Thank you. Representative Best.
I don't know if you wanted to finish, but if you weren't finished, you could take your time. Okay, great. So I didn't really have structured literacy training until like grad school. And it looks like all the research in your testimony is basically saying that this is a pivotal piece of the equation. But it looks like it's going to take some real thought for implementation. Helen, I'm glad that you mentioned this work with older students as well in the future. Alice, training during the day, it sounds like it just makes sense. Kate, thank you for providing us with solutions and not just challenges. My question is, how similar is this training to like the training that a speech pathologist would get?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we know to be true with foundational literacy is that it's a speech to print system. So it begins with speech, right? Our brains are naturally hardwired for oral language. And so a lot of the content that a teacher would learn as part of training in reading science has to do with the phonology of English. So learning correct articulation of the 44 phonemes and how we map in the brain print onto those phonemes. So it really is, when I said in my testimony about how it can feel a little wonky for elementary school teachers to be looking at brain scans and learning phonetics in that way, it does, but it's a very necessary part of understanding how the brain becomes wired to read. And speech pathologists and related service providers are partners with teachers in this system.
Great. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Representative Chang.
Big thank you to the panelists. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise and your experiences tonight. And a big thank you also to the reading instructors that are sitting behind you with the WTU who have been sharing your experiences with me for the last several years. In DC, like in most other places across the US, we saw a huge decline in reading outcomes after the pandemic. And in the last NAEP, we only 26.49% of our students were reading at or above proficient in 4th grade reading. And as you all know, it's not just a test score. The work of literacy is really about empowering people to live the lives of their choosing, right, and navigate the world around them. I am incredibly proud of this board's work and with your guidance, all of you in this room actually, to be able to put forward these recommendations and with my colleagues here are turning our attention to thinking about how do we actually implement the recommendations with fidelity. And so I think one of the areas where I have one of the largest buckets of questions that I'm going to pose to the whole room, actually, and of course would love to hear what, with the time we have left, from the panelists, but also from everyone else here, is around collaboration. Where do you see the greatest need for us to be collaborating in this work, either within schools, across agencies, and thinking about what nodes of this work we really need to be making sure that we do together?
Did you want to hear from other folks as well?
Oh, no, please first.
Okay. I think that really what this comes to next is implementation and how we can work together with all the different agencies that are named. I think that there are a lot of great experts and resources and ideas already present in the city, and so I think it is a question of just aligning. And for when I think about the recommendations and specific implementation, like very excited to continue working with OSSI and how we can, and the state board here, to make sure that we are able to do that well.
I think it's important that we have the funds and making sure that we're pouring money into this instead of asking people to do something without the funding, and also making sure that schools feel like it's non-punitive so that they're really able to be honest with their data and really get what's needed for students.
Thank you.
Representative Reed.
Good evening, Alex McNeil. I'm going to start with you. I was recently having tacos and thinking I was far, far away from DC education, and someone brought up literacy. This person does a lot of implementation science and mentioned DC frequently is tough when it comes to implementation. Great ideas, but getting things off the ground and keeping them going gets tough sometimes. And they also mentioned the piece that you mentioned about admin training in regards to the literacy piece. So I am curious, since you mentioned admin training, could you elaborate more about the what are the components, outcomes, and what should the focus of that training be? And how will it complement your second point or one of your points related to direct teacher supports?
I think it's important. I mean, schools are hierarchies, and the head of the school is the principal, it's administration, so it's important that they are up to speed on best practices. So anything that teachers are required to do in terms of structured literacy, the principals, I think that should be the baseline for them, that they should have the knowledge and the training, and then have people like Kate there to support them and help them like learn up. I think that's important, and really thinking about them being training and them also like training staff and being really open to best practices. And did that answer your question?
Yeah, you're hitting on, I'm hearing being supportive, understanding what the components are so that they can.
I think also not all of them are trained in structured literacy. Like that 10 years ago, this wasn't commonplace. Even 5 years ago, it wasn't commonplace. So their training as teachers may not have included structured literacy. So they really need the base of knowledge, and we need to make sure that they're up to speed on what best practices are, and then what it looks like, and how that might swing the pendulum from what they've been trained to look for in observations and telling staff this is what we expect in terms of teacher time and teacher and classroom structure, because things are really looking different if we're using these best practices.
Thank you for that. And Kate Noonan, you made me nervous about the choosing from a list of approved vendors, because I was worried about, like you were mentioning, some of your smaller LEAs may choose the cheapest because that's what they can afford. Can you elaborate on, I don't know, that makes me a little nervous about the choosing. So, I mean, yeah, I'm worried about the equity piece there.
Yeah, for sure. So that was part of the recommendations around how LEAs are going to access the training, that OSSI would essentially curate a list of trainings from a list of approved vendors. Mm-hmm. Obviously as a way to have some quality control over the rigor and the quality.
Is it just a stipend or is something else?
So it wasn't necessarily fleshed out in the recommendations, but it's just that they wanted to give LEAs some autonomy in terms of the type of training that they could pursue. So, mm-hmm. for example, instead of mandating like everybody has to do this particular training, that they could lean into previous training that educators are already bringing, that there could be different multiple pathways to showing that the training requirements have been met. And for new trainings, LEAs could choose from a list of approved vendors for that training to pursue that could better meet the needs of their staff.
Thank you. Representative Williams?
Yes. Thank you all for your testimony and for your work. I really value it, and thank you, Representative Change, for representing the board on this citywide task force. Dr. Bear, I'll start with you. You'd mentioned that providing LEAs flexibility on showing competency, and that like some teachers already have this training. Can you be concrete in kind of what the spectrum looks like in terms of a couple options of how teachers can demonstrate competency?
Yeah, what the recommendations name is that teachers can have sort of three pathways. They can demonstrate that they've already been trained through something like letters or the DC Reading Clinic, or they can pursue, some new training according to the different phases of time, or they can demonstrate competency through an exam. And that has, the details of that are fully unrealized. I mean, there's like a lot, it leaves that to be open-ended as like what that would include. But those are the three pathways that are currently open, and then, as Kate was discussing, the what will be approved training is to be determined.
Gotcha. Yeah, hearing that makes sense. It's also concerning just about the quality of the training. And I'm just kind of wondering if any of you want to speak to your thoughts around our capacity as a city, especially because we're not even talking about the rollout of middle or upper grades yet. We're still just talking about elementary school and pre-K. And as a high school teacher, I know many other high school teachers need this training to be able to meet the needs of our middle and high school students.
Yeah, I think capacity is a consideration, especially in phase one, because we're talking about training K-2 teachers in a great deal of content. But I can't speak to any specifics because I feel like we're waiting still on what those training options will look like.
Thank you. I'm going to move forward just because I only have 1 minute. Alice McNeil, thank you for reminding us about the undergirding of literacy as a civil right here and just the consequences. That's what's at stake with getting this right. Can you kind of name, one or two things that you think would make effective implementation of Recommendation 3 successful? Because teachers have so many things on our plates, right? So what does that really look like to frame it well and to start moving in the right direction?
I'm sorry. I think you're going to see kids a lot more engaged. I think you're going to see kids that are more confident, that like school, that want to be there because they feel like they have the tools and they feel like their teacher has the tools to support them in areas where they potentially might struggle. I think also if we think about modeling for our students, if we're learning something new and it's hard for us, we can share that this is an experience and that's something we can model for our students, like the perseverance, I thought this way, now I can do this, and really thinking about having a growth mindset and what that looks like for our students as adults and kids.
Thank you. I only have 10 seconds, so I just want to thank you again for your work. Ms. Newell, I'm interested to learn more about the work that's going on in Garrison and also the models that you mentioned that can support the piloting programs for literacy coaches. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Goulet?
I want to start by thanking you all for coming in. That was a great panel. I really appreciate your providing the expert guidance here. And I want to turn to my Ward 2 colleague here who is probably too humble to take credit for his work on this, but he's just done an amazing job keeping our board up to date on what he's learned and educating us on this issue and working with his Ward 2 council member to make sure we have funding for this. So we really owe you a debt for your leadership on this issue. I just have two quick questions, and I'd love to get your feedback on them. Ms. McNeil, you mentioned the issue of funding. What do you think the best mechanism to any of you on how we fund this is, and how do we make sure that the funds get directly to the schools, not getting caught up in any bureaucracy, and they get to the students who really need the help the most? So how do we fund this mechanically in the budget coming up?
I mean, I'm not an expert on funding. I think that money is there. I think that there's places where we can find it if we're really thinking about what's going to best support our city and really being proactive and thinking less about reactive, where we're putting money in reactive services and put it in proactive and put it in education, because schools are a metric of the health of a city. And if we're pouring money into our schools are going to be healthy, our city, our communities are going to be healthy. So I don't know exactly where, but I feel like there's a lot of money in this city and we can find it, because this is, to me, what's most important.
I'll just very briefly say that, like, as Alice described, the reading clinic is a huge time commitment for teachers, but we also compensate them for their time. They receive stipends. And so recognizing the incredible extra effort that they are going to do this training and to do this work with students, and so that may be a consideration.
Okay, that's fantastic, and I 100% agree, Ms. McNeil. We got to fund this in this budget coming up, and I'm just curious as to whether, and it may be a question for others, whether it should go in OSSI, whether it should go directly into DCPS and charter schools. But I we'll work that out. But we got to, as you point out, we got to make sure the money is there. Last question is, how do we make sure that students with special education needs, including those that may have dyslexia or other issues that you classify them as level 1 through 4 special ed, how do we make sure we tailor this to reach students that may have more difficulty reading because of a learning challenge they may have?
Yeah, I'll start by speaking to that. This is actually the most important thing we can do for our students with disabilities. Strong core classroom instruction is the most important first step. Because in many cases, especially if we start this early in pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, the symptoms of dyslexia never actually even manifest. So a robust intervention program, you cannot intervene your way out of a tier 1 problem, meaning that there's no dosage of intervention that can make up for poor core classroom instruction. So this is the most important first step, and from there, with robust screening, can identify and prioritize support for students that actually do have a disability.
Vice President O'Leary.
Making lesson plans, you're always backwards mapping. I'm a high school teacher. I was a high school teacher forever, and when I got students in the 12th grade, because I taught seniors for over 20 years, a lot of them were not reading at their grade level by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm really speaking for those high school students who come to the 9th grade reading on a 3rd or 4th grade reading level. Not for students who need it when they're in pre-K or kindergarten or first grade or whatever. What can we do as a city to make sure that the students who graduate are reading at a 10th grade reading level, which is being able to read the newspaper or a magazine or something like that? That's all really what you need when you get out of high school. Is there a testing program that works so that students, when they come to a high school class, are identified and can be tutored for that?
Absolutely. We have like simple screeners that we can give to students, really, beyond grade 1, just an oral reading fluency screening test that can identify whether there's a word level reading issue with accuracy or fluency. But the question is, once the students are identified, of course, how do we get them help? Because when we're talking about older students, this goes back to the issue of why it is so important to start with K-2 and get this right early. Is that a student who has progressed through school, who is not an accurate or fluent reader, has deficits not just on the word reading side, but on the knowledge side as well. Because the main way that we acquire new knowledge as we move through school is through reading. And if students are not able to access texts independently, they are missing out on critical vocabulary, background knowledge, really just the whole purpose of reading, right? Which is to build your language comprehension. And so you're really thinking about two different deficits.
Thank you. I'm going to cut you off a little bit because especially when I was at Cardozo, we had ELL students who had just arrived in the country, had no language skills, and a lot of our special ed students had reading deficits. And so that I just want everyone to understand that it's not it's a problem from the beginning, but it's also a huge problem at the end.
Yeah, I'll just add that, I do appreciate the recommendations include K-12 special educators and K-12 reading specialists for that reason. But I'll also just name that I think the clinic is going to be working and moving into secondary so that we can continue to provide that and for that support and that on-the-ground coaching. Students in those situations need a huge amount of time and increased intensity. So they need more time to learn to read, and they need one-on-one or very small group instruction. And so that is what we know from science, from evidence that is what students in those situations will need to learn to read.
Thank everyone here for coming to support reading.
President Thompson.
Good Good evening. Thank you all for your testimonies today. I think I have two questions. One, I think, builds a bit on what Representative O'Leary is talking about, like the kids who, like, so these recommendations focus on K through 2. So I'm a little bit concerned about what happens to the kids who have already passed through K through 2, and how we're going to support them, and what what we need in addition to what's recommended here in the implementation. So that's my first question.
I think to reiterate what I just shared too, it's K to 5, eventually training everybody K to 5. And I think what is thoughtful about the recommendations is who in 6 through 12 is getting the training, because if you get a reader who is struggling in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, it's going to be a reading specialist or a special educator who's going to be providing those really intensive services that students need at that point. And so it's a more targeted approach. I think that as the clinic thinks about expanding or works to like add, then that is where we look at, okay, who is providing that kind of small group instruction? And if it's also classroom teachers, then we can also work on providing that support to those teachers.
So I think my question is, do you think it should also be some classroom teachers? Because right now, if I'm a 7th grade teacher, let's say I actually want the training and raise my hand, the recommendations don't include me. Should it? Or should we think about them as well?
I believe there is an option that you can opt into training earlier than your phase allows for.
Okay.
Yeah, and like the clinic will take teachers as well who are interested in that. So there are options as well.
Okay. So that was my first question. My second question is, as we start to think about implementation, if you had to prioritize and say this can absolutely not happen without these supports based on your roles, what would those things be?
I'll go quickly. I think integration, as Dr. Grant talked about integration of these things, the content, the coaching, and the alignment of materials, those things all have to be in place for teachers to be able to implement the new content knowledge that they have.
I would say training.
I would echo both of those, that you can't have one of the recommendations without the other. They're meant to be implemented in sync, because we need the knowledge. We need to have administrators on board so that they can ensure that the enabling conditions are set up with their staffing routines, schedules. They have to understand the why behind why the changes are being made. And then we need to have on-the-ground support with coaching so that teachers can continue to develop and not just have one-and-done PD. And then we need instructional materials that allow them to actually teach in this research-based way.
With my last 10 seconds, I want to thank you all. I want to thank Representative Chang. And I'm really excited to kind of continue to push this ball, hopefully not up a hill anymore, but to get the funding for all the things you're talking about.
Thank you all for your testimony.
I want to thank you again for the applause. I invite you all to come back every month and applaud all of our expert panelists because they do a phenomenal job. I also want to thank them for their thoughts and suggestions tonight. They will absolutely help guide the board as we continue to collaborate with other leaders across the district to advance the recommendations on the report. I am going to call for a 5-minute recess. It is 6:31, so at 6:36 we will reconvene and move to public comment. Thank you.
Then okay.
what happened here. We have to start, we have to like step stop reading at the.
Yeah, I think that's like, I don't want to ever release.
Miss Vincent, you forgot me?
Are you still there?
Red board. Board's not great, just hell. I'm glad you spoke about kids at the opposite end. They should not one as long as you're in the middle. I am too.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we know where they come to you in AP English, read at third grade levels, comprehension of third grade Most of them get English, so congratulations for them. I know, but still, that's amazing. That's because he wanted to. That means wanted to. See, that's a whole different thing. Yes. Same here. I said, remember that's you still working. Oh, really? I'm not taking no hard days. I've been to so many high schools.
Yeah, we'd love to talk more about that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm very interested in the details of what gets
I would say you would always have to, but there are also the challenge of like the space and like more people the better, right? But in reality, if you're navigating a situation where it's like too many
All right, so we are moving into public testimony. We hear testimony from public witnesses at every public meeting, and your comments become part of our official record. If you would like to speak at a future public meeting, please sign up on our website at sboe.dc.gov or contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by phone at 202-741-0888. Tonight, we have several witnesses who submitted public testimony. We will hear from those in attendance in a panel format, broken up into groups of 3, because I see 3 chairs at the table. Each witnesses will have up to 3 minutes to provide comments. Please note that you must use the microphone at the table, which is already on. The timer light on the table will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, yellow for the last 30 seconds, and red after 3 minutes have lapsed. After our public witnesses speak, we will pause for questions from board members. Members, again, will have 3 minutes for questions for our public witnesses. Those 3 minutes still include their question or comment, they might comment, and the answer. Director Butler will call public witnesses to the table and announce the question rounds. She will also assist with timing to ensure our witnesses and board members stay within their allotted time. Director Butler, you may ask witnesses to come to the table. Thank you. At this time, we're going to call Vincent Verduco, Laura Fuchs, and Jeremiah Hill. Jacqueline Pogue Lyons. Okay, we are going to start with Ms. Jacqueline Lyon Post, Ms. Fuchs, and then Mr.
Good evening. Again, my name is Jacqueline Pogue Lyons, and I'm president of the Washington Teachers Union, and I'd like to thank everyone on the state board for all the support and help they've given us with both this contract and our last contract. So again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today about what's best for students, for the students of DCPS, and the utter inaction on the part of DCPS to work with the Washington Teachers Union on our contract, which expired on September 30th. I'm not going to mince words today. On at least 2 occasions, DCPS told the press that they have been actively negotiating with the WTU on a new contract since the beginning of the year. That would be news to my 25-member contract negotiations team that started their work in the spring before the end of the last school year. Ask any of the WTU team members if they have seen the chancellor or any member of DCPS team, they would not have come to the table. They have not come to the table, I should say. Throughout the summer, the WTU team worked on comprehensive student and teacher-focused proposals. Multiple times, we sent the chancellor's team possible dates and times to meet. You know what we got as their response? A 1-word email received. As part of their delaying tactics, DCPS leadership continues to focus on meaningless ground rules, an exercise that would cause even more delay in the process, even after the WTU made it clear that the teachers are ready for serious negotiations on consequential proposals that affect teaching and learning. DCPS continues to focus on delaying tactics such as a back and forth on insignificant rules. We are past the time to discuss rules that are already articulated in DC's city code. It is time to get to the table and work on real issues in DC schools. Whether they like it or not, there's a teachers union in this city that they have an obligation to work with. And frankly, it would be to the students' benefit if they worked with us. WTU has brought the chancellor and DCPS serious recommendations to deal right now with the very serious problems of violence in DCPS schools and in surrounding neighborhoods. Refusing to work with us on real solutions is to the detriment of every student, educator, and family in the city. About a year ago, we concluded negotiations with the city on a retroactive contract that took over 3 years after the contract's expiration. They may not feel like meeting with us in person to negotiate a new contract, but that's too bad. Our current contract expired last month, and everyone in this city knows we have real critical issues that must be addressed. The chancellor and his team can't be let off the hook. They owe it to the students of DCPS and their educators to show up. When DCPS stalls, they aren't just stalling on negotiations, they're stalling on safety, stalling on mental health supports, stalling on supports for high-quality instruction, stalling on fair and equitable compensation to retain and recruit the best staff. They're stalling on real solutions for DCPS students and families. I hope you agree with me and approve a resolution urging the chancellor and his negotiations team to get serious and meet with the WTU as soon as possible. Again, thank you for giving me this time.
All right, good evening. I'm here today, an educator of 17 years, all of which I've served at H.D. Woodson High School, a DC public school in Ward 7. I came to DCPS in 2007, the same year that mayoral control started, under the tenure of extreme privatizers Adrian Fenty and Michelle Rhee, and that is being carried on today by Bowser and Farabee. I can't speak to before mayoral control, but in my 17 years at DCPS, again 100% of which has been under mayoral control, I have spent the majority of my working time under expired WTU contracts. My first one was 3 years expired, my second 6 years expired, my other one 3 years expired, and here we go again. That is 70%, 12 years out of my 17 have been on expired contracts under mayoral control. This is a problem of the mayor. This is a problem of extreme privatization brought by Democrats for Education Reform and the Eli Broad Foundation's trained leaders who have wrought this kind of havoc on DC public schools. It is the same anti-labor efforts that caused Cesar Chavez Public Charter School to close its unionized campus, for Paul to engage in anti-labor activities to thwart organizing efforts, and for countless charter teachers to be fired without cause because they have no union protections. That is what they want to bring to DCPS. And it is a concentrated effort that DFER has made clear since 2007 that their whole intent was to destroy unions. Mayoral and DCPS leadership does not care about the high rates of teacher turnover, to the point where they constantly gaslight us and claim that it doesn't even exist. They do not care that we start each school year with vacancies. My school still has 4, by the way. They do not care that they are setting schools up to do poorly on the limited metrics they bother to care about, because to them it just leads to further justification for the continued demands to close public schools and sell the buildings on the cheap to charters. I am now on my 4th expired contract. How long will it take to fix? DCPS hasn't even given us the courtesy of showing up to the table before the contract expired. In any other district, this would be grounds for an immediate strike. But not in DCPS. And DCPS teachers are repeatedly gaslit, again by our upper leadership, into being told we should be grateful for what we currently have. But we all know it isn't just that DCPS has refused to meet with us yet. We know that once they come to the table, they will simply claim managerial rights and refuse to negotiate on almost anything in good faith. How do we know this? Because this is what has been going on since Michelle Rhee. And it's the primary reason these contracts have taken so long, as the W2 attempts to thwart their continued attempts to assert managerial dominance. So it isn't enough to demand that DCPS come to the table. We have to demand that they stop intentionally trying to further destroy our teacher workforce. Enough is enough. We need to demand that DCPS share their reasoning publicly for why they won't work with the WTU and listen to our concrete and fair demands, crafted by long-standing educators around class size, planning time, safety conditions, access to technology, and so much more. Correct the wrongs of the past and ensure that we have the time and resources we need to serve our students. Otherwise, we will continue to see the district hemorrhage good educators who look for their respect in neighboring districts or other professions entirely. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vincent Fedorko, and I'm a member of Ward 8 and proud bisexual man and member of Gays Against Groomers. I am here today because I'm concerned not only with where I see my community heading, but how my community is being represented within the education system. I have several concerns, the first of which refers to the transgender policy of the Washington School District established in 2015. Page 6, underneath the paragraph about student transition, states that parental participation is not required while a child is undergoing gender transition. This empowers a school to keep a student's transition secret from their parents, including name changes and bathroom swaps. You do not own these children, and all parents deserve to know what is going on with their kids. If a student is transitioning, their parents will eventually notice something is different, especially if they're somehow requiring puberty blockers or hormones without parental consent, because transitioning is heavily based on appearances. Driving a wedge between families isn't the smart idea that you think it is. And it's quickly dissolving the respect it took the gay community decades to earn. It's also inappropriate to be presenting confusing graphics like the gingerbread person in an attempt to separate sex from gender, not only because the two have always been intrinsically linked throughout human history, but because of the nuanced concepts in such a graphic aren't universally accepted as reality. The way these ideas are being presented to children into labeling themselves a fit-in destabilizes their sense of self, which is the last thing that they need from a school. And finally, based on your transformational learning document regarding the curriculum at DCPS, you claim to have the children's best interest in mind as well as their families. But how does focusing on a minor's sexuality actually help them? How can you justify keeping vital information on how a child is doing from their family? You can't be concerned with child safety if you're encouraging secrets and sexual content for children. The education system needs to be more careful with how they choose to represent the LGBTQ community and present it to children, because the current methods are destroying my community from the inside out. Stop demonizing parents while you still can, or you won't be able to build back their trust in the school system any easier than it will be for the gay community to earn back the respect lost through the push of gender ideology. Please get it out of our schools and focus on appropriate education. Thank you for allowing me to speak and express my concerns.
Thank you. At this time, we will call for a member round of questions. We will start again with our student representatives. Representative Yarkin.
Yeah, thank you. How do you plan to address potentially unsupportive or maybe even transphobic parents? Wouldn't that end up being worse for a student's mental health if they're transitioning and all of a sudden a school is informing their parents about their, drastic transition?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be that in the world, but I would also argue the same thing as I'd mentioned in my commentary, that whether it's, clothes or the different changes in styles and stuff like that, at the end of the day, not all, but some parents are going to notice. And while this is my experience, but I would think that it would be even worse, not only just the actual active parents who are, but also just saying, okay, so you knew this the entire time, didn't say anything, and then I would argue that even makes it worse, because then you're not only having the kid dealing with mental health, but also the school, and the pressure from that is oh, we can't have you here, or that kind of thing. At the end of the day, it shouldn't be a secret and that kind of thing. It's the tough answer, but I don't think it should be a secret, because the implications for knowing are much worse, or not knowing, I should say, are much worse.
So if a teacher finds out that one of their students is transitioning, you think they should inform the parents?
I do.
Okay.
Representative Villaflor.
So I have a question about what alternative ways do you think that schools can still educate about sexuality and inform their students?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a way that you can do it, and kind of the simple way, if I look at it, is you can be okay, a simple thing that I've actually heard from one of my coworkers of how she explains it to her children is, okay, so you'll have two people get married. One might be a man and a woman. It might be a man and a man. It might be a woman and a woman. and you can still do that in a way to be empathetic and teach that there are different, families and things of that nature. But a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now, I would argue that it's a pendulum swing, where we've gone from the complete opposite of it's bad, awful, we can't talk about it, to going the furthest route. And it's a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now in schools across the country is it's extreme, like pornographic material, or talking about all these things in such a complex way, where a lot of these kids, they don't understand it, and it's not the child's fault or anyone else's. Just these are very complex things to discuss, and so I think there's an age appropriate area that you do that. I would say in high school personally, where a lot of that stuff starts to come up, but you can still do it in a way that's understanding and empathetic to members of the LGBTQ community, without doing it in a way that's so extreme, or things that a lot of parents would be like, whoa, that's a little much for my child to be learning in 6th grade, 5th grade, 2nd grade even. So that's what I would take as my approach to solving it.
I guess so with the access to social media and the internet, I know a lot of students and children get premature, I guess, exposure to a lot of explicit content. What ways do you think schools can be able to, address this and give more, give better education on sexuality with that kind of exposure already happening?
Yeah. So I think a great question or answer to that is a lot of the schools, and this is just strictly speaking for the tablets themselves, but obviously they have certain barriers and stuff like that, so kids are actually focusing on their schoolwork. But I think there is a place that students can talk about that with their educators, and ask questions if they don't understand or that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it should be something that not only the educators are talking about, but students talk about with their parents. Because at the end of the day, parents are the first educators. Now, granted, some people might think they're okay, they're not doing it right, that kind of thing, but it shouldn't be something where it's, oh, we're gonna talk about this and not inform the parents. A lot of places, not all, but some of them have options where they're talking about sexuality and reproduction and stuff like that, and parents have the option to opt out of that, and that should be a standard across the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Henderson.
President Pogue-Lyons, on the last contract, how long did it take the chancellor to get to the table in those negotiations?
I don't think he actually came to the table. And mind you, I did not become president until 2021. But since the time that I became president in 2021 until we got the contract last year, I think it was, and it took 3 years, probably a year, and 2 years into the contract before we were coming to the table, and then it wasn't on a regular basis. And that's my fear for right now, is that we're going down the same, I call it raggedy road. We've gone down years and years in trying to get a contract done.
So on the last contract, we heard about delays due to interruptions from COVID and having additional agreements, and none of those factors are at play this go-round.
No, and I wouldn't say they were at play. That was the narrative that was created, but I would say that teachers are very good at multitasking. We had a wonderful bargaining team that was able to turn on a dime to work on the MOAs for COVID as well as the contract when needed. I just continue to say there's always an urgency on our part to do those important things, but not, to me, on the part of DCPS.
Could you and Ms. Fuchs both just reiterate, what are the costs to the city, to our students, for the delay?
Well, I think we have to show that we're really invested in our teachers. I say it all the time. The average teacher in the District of Columbia is in their early 30s. We do a wonderful job at getting them, but we do a poor job at keeping them. We're not going to keep teachers who are bright, knowledgeable, have lots of experience in a city like DC if we don't show them how important teaching is, and that means getting a contract done on time.
And I'll just quickly add, I mean, we know, like the old adage is, that our working conditions are student learning conditions. We're not just fighting for a contract for ourselves. Under mayoral control, this is one of the only avenues for which we can directly advocate for legally binding policies that support our students, right? Class sizes do help teachers and help make our job manageable so we can stay, but they also help the students have greater access to the education that they have a right to have. So this is it's for all of us as a community, as was stated earlier by Alice. Like, we got to invest in our schools if we want to solve a lot of the problems that our community is facing as a whole.
Thank you both.
Representative Best.
Thank you. Ms. Pogue-Lyons and Ms. Fuchs, how can we best assist you in this matter?
Just by us being here today and bringing our plight out to the public, to know that we did accomplish a contract last fall. We were hopeful that we could extend it, but that didn't happen. And now we're back at the table, that many of the things that we're asking for in this contract have to do with health, have to do with safety, have to do with keeping diversity in the teaching profession in a diverse city like Washington, D.C., and a lot of what we're asking for has to do with climate and the environment in our classrooms and in our communities. These are all things that directly tie to student achievement and keeping great teachers. So we just want support in getting the word out that this is important to the city.
Well, you know my style. I think, you have to embarrass the mayor. I mean, it's the only way to get anything. Like, she has to be in the news in a way she doesn't like. She has to be at a press conference where she wants to talk about something and someone else asks her a question about the contract instead. It pisses her off. She makes a mistake, and then finally they come to the table because then they pretend like, oh yeah, no, we meant to do these things the whole time. So I mean, and then she admits that maybe they weren't pretending to do that the whole time. So, I mean, it has to make the news, and so for me, it's about calling them out for the behavior. If we both sides it, if we say that DCPS and the W2 need to work together to do, no. We are here, ready to work together as a union. She and her team repeatedly, I mean, we have it here. Under mayoral control, they all have repeatedly refused to meet with us. This is a pattern of behavior, and it has to be called out for what it is, in a way that makes her angry, because it's the only way we've gotten her to the table in the past. So we have to embarrass her.
Thank you. As things change or don't change, just continue to keep us involved. Thank you.
Representative Reed.
Good evening. First, I want to say thank you to all the members of the WTU for showing up this evening. I'm sure some of you work long, hard days. Some of you are probably retired and probably want to be somewhere else besides in these chambers right now. But your presence is shown, and I think if anything, this shows that it's not you all who aren't showing up. It's the individuals who are on the other side of the table, and I hope we can come to some quick resolution. President Pogue-Lyons, you mentioned safety in your ask, and that's something that the board has been deeply engrossed in, and especially I know with being in Ward 8, we have so many schools that if we can just get safety around schools, it makes a greater impact within our ward in regards to safety. Can you outline, and I know I've seen probably in some of your documentation, but I would love for you to put on mic exactly what are the asks related to safety?
Well, we are asking to expand safe passage for our students in all neighborhoods within the district. We're also asking that teachers be given a survey every year to get feedback from them on how violence has affected them, how they believe it's affected their students. We're also asking that we form a committee that involves the community, that involves teachers, that involves parents, that involves students on actually how violence is affecting them on a day-to-day basis and coming up with solutions to fix it. We're asking for, it's the beginning of the school year and already we've suffered from violence outside our schools. It's difficult for staff and students to go right back to teaching the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s when you are really affected by violence. What are those steps that we can take to both support students and teachers when there is violence in the school. And we have some steps to help understand that this is not normal, and how can we make our students understand that it's not normal and still support our teachers in supporting our students. And those are some things that are contained in our memorandum of agreement that we delivered to DCPS in June.
Mr. Fedorko?
Fedorko, yes.
I apologize for that. Were there actual materials that you have come across? And I'm also curious about students who may not feel comfortable or is frankly unsafe for them to go to their parents.
Okay, yes. So in answer to your first question, yes. The document that I was referring to was the DCPS transgender policy guidance that was released in 2015. That has both the gingerbread person diagram. It was on my phone, so I apologize, but that, as well as what I was referencing in the commentary, was on page 6 of that document, the student transition section, where it says that parental participation is not required.
I'm at my time, but I heard the document that you mentioned. It sounds like a DCPS situation.
Representative Chang.
President Boglians, I want to continue down Dr. Reed's line of questioning just to better understand the asks for the other themes related to climate, environment, and any other things as well.
Right. Well, we are also, since we've gone through COVID, we know that we have to have safe environmental spaces for our students in the schools. So how do we create committees that work toward making sure, now that we're dealing with COVID hasn't gone away, we're dealing with flus, RSV, and anything else that might come down the pike. How do we make sure the school environment is safe? We're also asking, how do we examine and have safe spaces for kids to be outside? And what does experiential learning look like, both inside as well as outside the school, particularly when you think about some of our underserved communities where it's not safe? How do we make sure that kids can learn while they're outside too? We're also very concerned with diversity in our schools, particularly as we know the price of going to college is really expensive. How do we make sure that we keep what we think is wonderful in the city, which is a diverse teaching staff? How do we ensure that we can support our new teachers financially? How can we support our teachers in passing the tests to get certified? And what are those supports we can give them once they're in the classroom, once we have them, that we make sure they stay? So those are all the environment and climate and the diversity. Those are all MOAs that we delivered to DCPS in August.
Thank you. That's helpful. And on the note of teacher retention that you named in your testimony, I'm curious if you have new numbers.
No, we are still putting the numbers together. I know that routinely we lose up to 1/4 of our teachers every year. We're still working with DCPS to get the final numbers of how many teachers we lost last year and how many we've gained this year. But I'd be happy to share them once we can give everyone solid data.
Thank you. That would be great. And with my last few seconds, does the WTU do an exit survey separate from what DCPS does of teachers?
No, we don't get the information necessary to do exit surveys, but we think that's something that should be required of DCPS, to do exit surveys and actually share those surveys with the community and particularly with the Washington Teachers Union.
Yep. A quarter staff turnover every year is a very, very challenging.
Right, and particularly because we know what happens with our impact that negatively affects brown and black teachers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Williams.
Yes, thank you all. I'm going to continue off of Representative Chang's line of questioning. So Yeah, the level of teacher turnover in our city is like astounding, right? It's a huge, huge concern. So I guess, President Pogline, like, what are your thoughts on how to best reform impact? And specifically, like, what do you think the teachers union at this point can support? Like, I've been in conversation with people about like a task force, right, to be able to look for recommendations. But I'm deeply concerned because the numbers in years past have been 20, 30%, right? Like, we're not, and it's gotten worse even since COVID. So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on ideas that can be supportive, because my understanding is that the council will be holding hearings on this in, sometime soon, to be able to talk about that.
I think we actually have to acknowledge that impact is not working. It's not necessarily getting the outcomes that they said it would get us in the beginning. I think we also had to acknowledge in a real way that it is racist and biased against brown and black teachers. And we also have to bring teachers to the table. I was a kindergarten teacher, and I can tell you that the first grade teacher wanted to make sure that I was an excellent teacher. Teachers should be at the table when it comes to how we're being evaluated, and we're not going to get and keep great teachers unless we acknowledge in this district that what we have right now is not working, and that it is racist and biased, and that we are not bringing the people who are on the line every day to the table to help with the evaluation system.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't agree more. So part of that, right, like, is the dysfunction of not even being able to get DCPS to the table. But I'm curious, in terms of like a reasonable timeline of when, if they came to the table next week, luckily or whatnot, like, what is the timeline in order to get something done? Because Representative Goulet has kind of mentioned that, getting the money in the budget this year is going to be important to making sure teachers get paid next year. So I'm just concerned that, like, they're dragging their feet so that we can have a budget cycle that kind of plays out, in which we're going to have to push that money through the council rather than getting it in the mayor's budget this year.
I can definitely assure that if we made an effort to come to the table in person with dates, that we could get a contract done very soon before the end of the school year. But there has to be a commitment to say, well, if teachers are in person every day, cafeteria workers are in person every day, security guards are in person every day, maintenance people are in person every day, it is not acceptable that DCPS central office doesn't think that they have to be in person to negotiate a contract.
Yeah. Thank you.
Representative Goulet.
President Polk-Lyons, thank you so much for your leadership and for your testimony today. I think you're doing a stellar job. I just can't say how disheartened I am to hear, that the chancellor hasn't been negotiating in good faith. It's really extremely frustrating. Have they put any proposal on the table whatsoever to try to advance the ball forward? We're 9.5 months behind where we should be right now, and teachers without a contract again. Has the chancellor, anyone on his team, put a proposal on the table to start these negotiations?
I have to be transparent that so far, and not getting into the details, but the only thing that they've been stuck on is the ground rules, and they refuse to move forward until we go back and forth about ground rules. Everyone knows that we have a DC code as far as how you negotiate contracts, and so to answer you, no, they haven't. We've given them MOAs, 3 MOAs, 13 proposals, and they have not given us counter proposals on our proposals or counter proposals on our MOAs, and they haven't set forth their own individual proposals. No, they haven't.
I mean, that's so disappointing and unacceptable on the part of DCPS leadership. I mean, they should start by sitting down at the table and negotiating in good faith. Sitting here debating ground rules virtually is not what they should be doing. They should be working with you to get to a contract, because we're already significantly behind where we need to be. I want to put on the record, last budget cycle was the worst I have seen in 21 years. And this set it off on the wrong foot. It was the biggest cut to the buying power of our local schools in those 21 years that I have seen. And it started because we got 3 years in arrears in negotiating with good faith with our teachers. And that is completely unacceptable that we're doing this. I mean, Washington, D.C. should be a mecca where teachers want to come from across the country to teach our kids. They should want to be able to stay here. But things like this dissolve morale, they build distrust, and then it leads to other issues. It compounds other issues like overcrowded classrooms because we can't staff up our classes. And teachers were begging to me, we need more classes. We need help. We're teaching a class of 35 to 40 students. We're losing our planning periods because we've got to cover for other teachers that are out sick. I mean, everything you've put on the table today is something that is reasonable and is worth sitting at the table and discussing in good faith to try to get to an agreement. And I would just encourage the Chancellor, we really need him to get back to the table. And I think this whole board across the, from one side of the dais to the other is deeply concerned that we're in this position. And I just want to thank you all for coming out and making your voices heard tonight on this issue. So thank you so much.
And I'd like to thank you, Representative Goulet, for taking on our plight.
Vice President O'Leary.
I feel as though I need to recuse myself from this conversation because I have an incredible bias for the teachers. I've got a list of things. Transparency. How in the world can a system not tell me in the middle of September how many teachers there are in a building? Mental health services for teachers. One of the things that the only reason I think that the contract was approved was because of the pandemic. We might still be in negotiations from the last contract if it hadn't been for the pandemic. I'm not trying to say the pandemic saved anything, but I just can't imagine why. Because when I retired 6 years ago, there was no contract. And teacher retention. The system says that they don't have a teacher retention problem. And everyone in this room is in a school building where there's a teacher retention problem. Or there's a vacant classroom and they have to cover that. Right. Building conditions. I'm the Ward 4 representative. We have a lot of brand new schools that have some problems with their building conditions. And we have some really old schools that have some real problems with their building conditions. And the building conditions affect everyone in that building. And this is an emergency. And the emergency needs to be solved by the executive. The mayor could decide tonight that we need to have a new contract for the teachers. And the teachers would get the contract. Period. End of sentence. So we need to do, and I'm saying we because I have obviously didn't recuse myself, we the teachers need help from the executive to get a contract. And if it means bypassing the people in the negotiation room, then that's what needs to be done. I don't have to ask you any questions. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
President Thompson.
Good evening. So first I actually want to address Mr. Fedorko, and I want to thank Representative Jarkin and Villaflor for asking the right questions, what I think are the right questions anyway. I also want to actually read a little bit of language from the document you're citing because I think it's important. Regardless of the timing of a student's transition, the school shall act in accordance with the following developmentally appropriate protocols. These protocols are guidelines, but each student's situation should be handled according to the maturity of each individual student while still respecting that student's rights. I think it's important to say that because I heard the questions they asked, and I don't want to give the impression that there aren't actually, and there's a full list of developmentally appropriate protocols in this DCPS document. So I think that should be on the record. And we are not talking about 5-year-olds the same way we're talking about 15-year-olds. So I want to be very clear and responsible about that. Second, I want to turn to President Polk Lyons and Ms. Fuchs. I am sorry that this is the second time that I will be voting on a resolution to say, let's get a teacher's contract. That is more than disappointing to me. And I think about when my mom retired, and it's not that I have favorites, but I do, of course, have a favorite teacher who is my mom. And she said that that was the best contract she had seen, but she didn't believe it could get done. And I know that we have a huge teacher retention issue, which is something several of our colleagues brought up. And I know there are people like my mom who maybe if they believed it could be done and it could be timely, that they might actually still be in the classroom. Now, spoiler alert, she is actually back as a full-time sub at Patterson and living her best life with some of her former students. But I do believe that what Ms. Fuchs said about it being a pattern is terribly troublesome. I think the fact that she pointed out 12 of her 17 years sorry?
The entirety of mayoral control.
Yeah, 12 of her 17 years were without a contract. That's devastating. That's not a point in time, that's a pattern. Right. And so I do look forward to be able to vote yes in supporting the resolution, but I'm so sorry that we even have a need to ask people to come to the table again. Right. So I thank you all. I will yield the rest of my time because I'm looking forward to hearing from more witnesses, but definitely appreciate you all showing up this evening. Thank you.
At this time, we call the following witnesses to the podium: Regina Bell, Tiffany Randall, Taisha Andrews. Nathan Sparks, we'll start with Ms. Bell.
Good evening, President Thompson, Vice President O'Leary, State Board of Ed members. My name is Regina Bell, General Vice President of the Washington Teachers Union, Ward 3 resident and proud parent of 3 DCPS alumni. I'd like to thank the State Board of Ed for your commitment to literacy, to students and teachers, and particularly your interest in the teacher's contract. It was almost a year ago to the day that the State Board of Ed passed Resolution 22-10 on the timely settlement of the WTU contract. Shortly after that resolution was passed, President Polk Lyons signed a tentative agreement with the Chancellor. During the ratification hearing, the Council Chairman requested that the WTU and DCPS negotiate the next contract on time. That contract expired on September 30th. The WTU heeded the Chair's warning and sent several proposals to DCPS over the last several months. DCPS has yet to respond substantively. I hope this year's resolution will spur DCPS to again come to the table. Resolution 23-13 notes the high teacher attrition rates and teacher shortages. If you look at the recent vacancy list, schools are still hiring for special ed, ESL, social workers, and psychologist positions. The severe shortage of these professionals has resulted in larger classes for special education students, ESL students not getting services, and students not receiving the social and emotional supports they need. These are critical services needed by our most vulnerable students. By refusing to negotiate with the WTU, DCPS is telling our community that the teachers and students they serve don't matter. I'd like to thank the State Board of Ed member Eric Goulet for introducing this resolution. I encourage the board to approve it. Thank you for allowing me to testify and for all you do to ensure we have the best schools possible for the DC community and, more importantly, our children.
Start? No? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Ty Andrews. I am a Ward 8 resident, proud parent of one child at Plummer Elementary and one at McKinley Tech. I'm also a parent leader with PAVE on the citywide Ward 8 PLE boards, a Plummer LSAT member, and a McKinley Tech PTO first vice president. I'm testifying about necessary renovations and additional funding for staff that need to be completed and provided for Mary H. Plummer Elementary building and demand that they receive funding to build a whole new school. I've testified before you at least twice before in reference to most of these issues and will continue to testify until they are rectified. The Plummer building has not been renovated since 2005, and the renovation took place in just one summer break. The brightness and colors inside any school building impact the mental stability of staff and students. A brighter school is a happier school. More time is needed to fully renovate an education center for our children. The first floor has limited natural lighting due to lack of windows. I'm sorry, I lost my spot. Okay, Plummer needs to look more inviting to the community to increase enrollment and ensure that funding stays the same. It is challenging for Plummer to compete for enrollment with an older building. In addition, the library has folding chairs and old carpets for the students to sit on. The bookshelves are not conducive to the height of elementary school children. Plummer also has been having an ongoing HVAC issue since 2016. In 2019, it was so hot in the school that they had to move the summer school to another location. Repairs for the system are always temporary, and some rooms must have window AC units. In addition, there is exposed piping in the stairwell and gym. Plummer also has an electricity issue where they cannot get an electric marquee due to the inability to provide appropriate power. There's limited storage in classrooms, which does not compare to newer schools. Plummer also has 3 federally mandated autism classrooms, but only 1 part-time paraprofessional. Funding should be provided to Plummer for a full-time paraprofessional. Plummer is also currently without a speech pathologist or occupational therapist. There are children that require these services at Plummer with families that do not know how to find outside resources or how to navigate the system to ensure that their child receives those services. How are we supposed to support our DC youth if they are not provided with the required assistance and resources to be better and prevail in life, let alone education? Based on these facts, Plummer should receive additional funding for staff and be added to the list of schools on the DGS School Modernization Project. I would like to ask that you all consider producing a plan to speak with the necessary agencies to rectify or at least address the issues that I've presented today. I can also make myself available to provide further details on any of the information I provided. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, esteemed members of the State Board of Education, members of the audience here today, and those who are watching or listening live or to the recording. My name is Nathan Sparks. I teach environmental science and AP environmental science at Jackson Reed High School. This school year is the beginning of my 3rd year teaching. It's also my 3rd year with DCPS. I'm here tonight to support my union, the Washington Teachers Union, and all the teachers in our bargaining unit so that we may get a fair contract in a reasonable amount of time. Our contract expired on October 1st, 2023. We've been working without a contract for more than half a month now. In the private sector, they can strike if their contract expires. Here in DC, as public employees, we're required to work without a valid contract, and I think that's ridiculous. We're professionals caring for the youth of our city. We take care of children of this district. Thousands of children attend DC public schools every day, and yet their teachers are treated as an afterthought. The managers of DC public schools, Mayor Bowser's office, the City Labor Management and Employee Relations Office, and the DCPS Chancellor Farabee haven't met with us to even begin the bargaining process. They've had months to respond to our bargaining team, let alone schedule a meeting with our bargaining team. If I was this unresponsive and comatose as a teacher, I would have been fired immediately. Yet this seems to be business as usual for DC government and the Bowser administration, at least when it comes to teachers. This is irresponsible governance and disrespectful management in action. Seeing this horrendous display of disdain for teachers, I ask, how is it possible that the DC City Council create and pass a budget without knowing the labor costs for the upcoming school years? This is budgeting 101. You need to know your costs when you're making a budget. otherwise associated, otherwise costs associated with a new contract will have to come from other allocations or new funding sources altogether. This budgetary dilemma is problematic for teachers as well, especially if we want to keep the teachers we already have and attract additional teachers, both new and experienced, to the district. Teachers used to be paid on par with doctors and lawyers, but our profession has been attacked, underpaid, under-resourced, and demonized for decades. So our pay is no longer anything close to what it should be. When our union surveyed DCPS teachers, it showed that increasing pay in our next contract was the top priority for the majority of DCPS teachers. It's essential that management meet with our bargaining team as soon as possible to begin negotiating so that pay increases be accounted for in upcoming budget formulations. Again, this is a basic principle in budgeting. It makes budgetary sense to negotiate a contract in a reasonable amount of time, and it's also vital for the quality of our schools, the quality of our children's education, and the stability of our local economy. Compulsory educational institutions are the largest publicly owned and operated child care facilities in our nation. Without teachers in the classroom, our city would come to a screeching halt, and we saw this during the pandemic. Without teachers educating and caring for students, parents and guardians who work would scramble to find child care for the children, yet teachers, again, are treated as an afterthought. When teachers are treated as an afterthought, children are treated as an afterthought, and our society is worse because of it. If you care about students, if you care about children of a district, the State Board of Education needs to request management begin negotiating with us at the WTU on our new contract. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will start our round of member questions. We will begin again with our student representatives. I turn to Representative Yarkin.
Hi, thank you so much. As a student, very appreciative for all that you do, teachers, and also for the administration of the union, all you guys do for the teachers, which, you know, do a lot for us. I have a question for Vice President Bell. Does the Washington Teachers Union have a plan to put a halt to the pattern mentioned earlier by President Thompson, where you have a, teacher who is working majority of their career under expired contracts? Because we're all in support of the speedy negotiations, but is there a plan for subsequent contracts so that we're not in the same situation again?
Well, it takes two to tango, and we're always ready to bargain, and it just takes DCPS to come to the table. And I just realized that you're a former student at Merch. Wow. He's changed a little bit since elementary school.
Sorry, did I miss something?
Well, could you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm just saying, is there a plan for subsequent contracts?
No, we'd like to get through this one first.
All right, we're going to go to Representative Villaflor.
Yeah, I also just want to echo the same thing that my fellow representatives said about how I appreciate everything that you do as teachers, and that you care about you care about students. I agree that it's like outrageous that negotiations are like there was a refusal to like have negotiations in a timely manner, and I'm in full support of pretty much everything that you said. I don't have any questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Henderson.
Ms. Andrews, thank you for coming back. Thank you for your continued advocacy for Plummer. I would also like to enlist you in advocacy for McKinley. I can work with you on some additional asks for that. I'm fully in support of what you're asking for Plummer. For the WTU representatives, we had the opportunity to talk to Chancellor Farabee at our May working session, and I asked him what barriers we might face for this contract that we didn't face last go-round, and he said that there weren't the same barriers this time. So I fully expected us to be moving along, but it's more and more clear just how intentional the delay is as a tactic, and it is very unfortunate. The consequences are wide and deep in teacher retention, and as you pointed out, Mr. Sparks, for our budgeting, and we experienced quite a bit of turmoil because of the past delay. So I hope that we can avoid that. I have no further questions.
Representative Best.
Once again, thank you for all that you do, and I know I speak for everyone here when we say that we look forward to advocating on your behalf with this. Also, Miss Andrews, I believe.
Yes.
If we've just started like building a relationship with DGS as well, and so like if you follow up with us, like we can send your concerns like up the ladder and see where they are as far as like the building is concerned. Okay. And that's it. I don't have any other questions for you.
Thank
Yeah.
Representative Reed.
Thank you, Representative Henderson, for mentioning the May 10th working session and reminding us that we are probably being as equally gaslit as you are in relation to the responses. Definitely, you know, where we can advocate, we will. We have to advocate on accurate information. That's the only way that we can do it. So we need to know exactly what's going on, what are the holdups within the ramifications of your rules, but it seems like rules haven't even been established yet. I do have a question for Ms. Andrews, or actually not really a question, kind of, it's a hybrid question / comment related to DGS. I believe I might have a meeting with them on Friday or coming up soon, and it makes no sense for me to go alone. And for others in the room. So if you're interested, it's at 2 p.m. I also can try to rearrange it because I know that's not the best time for teachers or parents. But if you're interested, I think it'll be a stronger advocacy point to have individuals talk about the systems issues that DGS should be aware of versus them just talking to me, which I'm happy to do that. So I can get your information. Yep.
Is that this Friday?
Yes.
I'm actually off of work. I took off since my kids are out of school.
Okay, so I'll hold two. Okay, cool. It's a date, and I'll get your contact.
Yes.
Yeah, that was my hype. So we can figure out, prepare for that.
Definitely.
Okay,
Thank
great. That's it for me.
Thank you. Representative Chang.
Ms. Bell, first of all, thank you for your continued support for the literacy work and sharing your experiences in that realm as well. You named that schools are still hiring for special ed, ESL, social workers, psychologist positions. Would appreciate your help to elaborate on the consequences of these roles remaining unfilled.
Well, the special ed students aren't getting the services they need. They're not getting tested, and the students aren't getting the social and emotional supports they need. So there's a lot of consequences. And I don't think DCPS won't be in compliance. But will the teachers who get dinged?
And when you speak with folks who are in these roles, what are the pressures that you're hearing they're currently under?
Well, they have to try to service the students, even though there's not time in their schedule. It's just, it creates more work for the teachers who are in the buildings and leads to burnout.
Could I add to this? One of my co-teachers is a special educator. He was told he had to turn around a single day to get a 504 plan done for a student. So that's, I mean, we're talking about an amount of time that someone would need to do that, you know, several days for one student, and to gather documentation and to review those things. So burnout and not being in compliance with federal laws regarding special education, it's a pretty serious issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will go to Representative Williams.
Thank you all. You know, I also see firsthand the consequences that Representative Chang mentioned and that you talked to. And I just want to say that I stand in solidarity with what you all are doing and trying to get the mayor and DCPS to come to the table as soon as possible. You know, I appreciate Representative Goulet for getting this done quickly, and I'm in full support. So thank you all for showing up here today and getting more attention to this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Goulet.
I want to thank you all. And I don't know what's going on with DC government right now, because the plumber issue right now is central problem we're seeing right now with the boundary study and the master facilities plan, which I mean, we have not even really seen good data yet. on that process, and it's supposed to be wrapped up in 2.5 months, but really needs to be delayed at this point, because back in 2006, this city made a commitment that we were going to modernize all these buildings to show our kids that we really cared about their education, so they weren't stepping into schools that showed, you know, either dimly lit classrooms, repairs that needed to be made. And I can't thank you enough for your continued advocacy on Plummer, because that absolutely needs to be in this plan. And we have not seen a master facilities plan, even a draft of one, that addresses these concerns yet. And I am not clear on what is happening with that process. I've tried to go to every meeting, but we spent most of the time just talking about like values and ground rules, almost like with this contract that the task force would debate. And now it's the middle of October, and they're still talking about trying to pump something out in January, when if we don't have schools like Plummer, like Whittier, in there for full modernizations in this 5 to 10 year facilities master plan, then we really drop the ball as a city. So I think that needs to be delayed. I've got a second resolution on that one that we can talk about another day. But I just want to thank you both. I mean, I intend to just light the Ward 3 listservs up at this point on this issue. Parents, Ms. Bell, as you know, in Ward 3, we're just absolutely furious at those cuts that came down. Many of our schools seen reductions of 6 teachers, and the parents were incensed in Ward 3 about that proposed budget. And I think you point out the reason why, Mr. Sparks, is that when you get behind 3 years on a contract and you fit 12.5% into basically just a 5.8% increase to the funding formula, the math doesn't work. So something got cut, and it was our schools. So we've got to get it done before the budget. We're already 9.5 months behind. And I just urge the Chancellor, please return to the table. Let's get this done before the next budget comes around, because we just can't have a situation that repeat itself like we did last year. So thank you all for your testimony.
Vice President O'Leary.
Ms. Andrews, you mentioned competing for enrollment. All right? How difficult is it? This is a rhetorical question. For a school that is in disrepair, like Plummer, like as Representative Goulet mentioned, Whittier in Ward 4. How difficult is it? And they have a thriving PTO and everything like that, but to have someone visit your building and try to sell it to someone who wants their child to get a quality education, which is what the district's promise is that all students should receive a quality education in a safe, secure, and educationally, what's the word? Appropriate building. So to compete with a brand new school is almost impossible. But it's not just the students that are suffering. It's the teachers and everyone else that works in the building. They are the ones that are suffering. Now, I worked in a building at Cardozo that was, at the beginning, was at the top of the list to be modernized, and it kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back again. All right, now it's a beautiful building, but it got pushed back. Whittier is 4 years away from being modernized, and we can't get the trailers there so students can at least be in air conditioning and heat during those seasons, so that they've done some stuff that's helped the building, but it's still a really old building. And that's the problem that we have to understand in the city. Every school should be a place where we as parents would want our child to go to get a quality education. And if it's not that, then the government has failed their most important people, and those are our children.
President Thompson.
So I want to thank the panel for their testimony. I'm going to start with Ms. Andrews. So you know I'm a Plummer Panther for life. My mom went to Plummer, and when I was a kid at Plummer, there was a desk that I'm pretty sure she had carved her name into, and that's not an exaggeration. I have 2 cousins who are students at Plummer now, so I know the building very, very well. It is absolutely a beautiful community, and it deserves a building to match. And so when I saw in the budget that it was slated only for a cafeteria and still not a full modernization, I don't even have the words to express how I feel about that, because we've been piecemealing that building together, and it is my school. Like, I feel very strongly that it is my school. So I'm glad that you came back and testified before us today. I will likely be before the council with you, testifying yet again, as I have been for years, about the building, and I am going to work with you to get that building done. We will get that building done. So that's the first thing. Second, I do have a question that I realized about the previous contract. So I know part of the delays were not in the negotiation, but once everything was agreed to, there were supposed to be payments for hard-to-fill positions, and that seemed to not quite happen. Is that still the case? Like, are we good on that? Are we up to date on that, or is there still are there other things we should be paying attention to that are also lagging?
There are still some teachers who haven't been paid from last school year.
Okay. And have there been any rationales, clarifications, responses as to why?
Not that I've heard.
Nothing new. Okay. Thank you. So I think that's something to check on as well. I do have a running thread of things with DGS and the Chancellor. I'll add these things to my running email list, but I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't hanging out there and we didn't know. So thank you for letting us know. I don't have any other questions because everything else makes sense, is reasonable, and I appreciate you all's testimony tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to call our final set of witnesses. I'm sorry, they sent me a new list. Michael Donaldson, Dieter Lehman Morales, okay, we'll start with you, Mr. Donaldson.
Hi, my name is Michael Donaldson. I am a teacher at Alicedale Middle School. I'm also the building rep at Dale Middle School. I'm also an adjunct at UDC Community College, and I'm also the chair of the Committee on Political Education for the Washington Teachers Union. So I wear a lot of hats, and with that said, I'm very committed to this city. I'm also a Ward 5 resident. I would be remiss if I didn't address some comments earlier that personally affected me. If you'll indulge me on a very short story about a boy who was raised in Central Virginia during a time where there was no LGBTQ representation, and had somewhat conservative parents and did not see those people in school and wondered whether they belonged there, and went to a school similar to Deal. So it was an African-American boy in a school where there were a lot of non-African-American students, and to think if you belong there and if you should exist at all. That boy became a man, found his worth. That boy is me. I am a gay man. Sexuality aside, a kid feeling otherized is not anything that we can accept in our school. The students should feel and be a part of a community. At Deal, we pride ourselves in being a community. The other piece that is hard for me is that this morning, I found out that one of my gender nonconforming students passed away. And I'm not going to say why, but when you don't see yourself represented and you don't feel belong, or you get lost and you don't think you belong somewhere because someone's worried about what bathroom you're going into, or someone's worried about if you're sexualizing in the school and you're in middle and early high school, you start to question whether you exist. And if you don't have someone to step in or someone to show you that it's okay to be who you are, whatever you look like is just fine. Be yourself. DCPS is not about, and I'm going to be frank, sexualizing children. They're about representing children and making them feel safe and welcome and that they have a place in their community. So I'm going to stand strong on that, and I want to say myself as a gay man that I want our students to feel welcome and to feel like there's a place for them and that they should absolutely exist. With that said, I did not come here to talk about that. I came here to talk about the fact that I'm also on the contract bargaining team, and I think President Pogue-Lyons and Vice President Bell were very polite in the way that they stated what we have been doing all summer. We spent 3 hours a week in the basement of the Washington Teachers Union, where DCPS, we have no clue what they were doing all summer, coming together for kids and for teachers to be represented, to stop the violence that's going on in our communities, to build a safer place where teachers that look like me, and that's the reason why I came into teaching, can feel like this is somewhere they can stay. Because I can tell you, as a black man, somewhere without stability, I'm not going to be, because that's not the person that my parents wouldn't want me in a situation where my career and my finances are unstable. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Esteemed members of the State Board, my name is Dieter Lima Morales, and I thank you for granting me the opportunity to speak tonight. Those who know me best know that I wear many hats, just like Michael does. I am an ANC, and I sit on the executive board of the WTU. But nothing makes me prouder than being able to say that I teach world history to 10th graders at Columbia Heights Educational Campus, in the same neighborhood where I live and I represent. I started my teaching career just last year, and it has been the most rewarding experience of my life thus far, and I do not regret changing careers for 1 second. But this has also been an eye-opening experience for many reasons. High on the list is seeing firsthand how little our school district and our mayor regard our teachers and our students in this city. It is demoralizing, but seeing the disdain with which we are treated is also galvanizing. And I am glad to have the 5,000 sisters and brothers in the WTU behind me in this struggle for a new contract. As a 31-year-old Latino teacher, and I bring that up because that's the average age of teachers nowadays in the District of Columbia, I take my duty to lead by example seriously. That is why I decided to join my union's contract negotiating team alongside Michael and fight on behalf of our district's teachers and students for a contract that will diversify our workforce, for a contract that will prepare our schools for the climate crisis, and for a contract that will entice our teachers and our students to stay in the District of Columbia. To close, from one elected official to another, I want to implore the State Board, through this resolution, to demand in the strongest possible terms that Mayor Bowser do her job and get Chancellor Farabee to come to the bargaining table. But please don't just stop there. Name DCPS as failing to negotiate, advocate for open negotiations, and even demand a hearing. So Chancellor Farabee and Mayor Bowser, if you're watching this at home right now, my name is Dieter Lima Morales, and I'm a proud DCPS teacher and WTU member. I want you to know that my comrades and I have done our job, and now it's time for you to do yours. And stop gaslighting the people of the District of Columbia with false claims about negotiating in good faith. Because what's done in the dark will always come to light. And I yield my time.
Thank you both for your testimony. At this time, we will restart with our panel questions, and we'll start with Representative Yarkin.
Thank you very much for coming with your stories. I don't have any questions.
Representative Villaflor.
I also want to thank you guys for coming to testify. I definitely agree how like homophobia and violence in schools can run kind of rampant, and I think that improved teacher conditions and teaching conditions and encouraging more teachers from different backgrounds to teach at schools would give students a very valuable, will give students more, I guess, experience with teachers from different backgrounds, which helps to kind of alleviate that problem of lack of understanding of other people's identities. And yeah, I'm in agreement with, I'm in agreement with both of you. Yeah, I have no questions.
Representative Henderson.
Mr. Donaldson, I'm sorry for your loss and the loss to your community, and thank you for pivoting to step into that space and say what you needed to say. Thank you both for your testimony.
Yeah, man, losing a student is never, it's never easy. I usually have like a lot of words to say, but I think at this time I'm stuck. But having that community is so important. Having that person to talk to is so important. So I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing to make sure that you're there for students who may look like you, students who may feel like you, students who may be a younger version of yourself. Yeah, my heart goes out to your students and to his or her family or their family. I'm sorry, I don't have anything else to say, but thank you for being here.
Representative Reed.
Michael Donaldson, thank you for all the hats that you wear and showing up, frankly, in a time that most would have wanted to stay home or be with their school communities, but you're also here with another hat and advocating. I appreciate your comments in regards to exactly what to center as we continue to have conversations related to student identity as we build in. We're coming up on social emotional standards, so I would love that reminder again as we're looking at how to make sure students feel as supported as possible. And like Representative Best said, like school is truly a community that's supportive and where students feel loved. Mr. Dito Morales, good seeing you again, and here.
Thank you. Representative Chang.
Mr. Donaldson, I also want to say thank you for sharing your personal story. Is there anything else in the testimony that you had originally planned that you would like to take this time to share?
I think my colleagues have said it very well. I think the part that I wanted to hit home with DCPS is the reason why I personally became a part of the contract bargaining team is because I wanted to build the type of, district where teachers want to come to and want to stay in, and where students feel safe, where students feel like they can come. I have students who come back, and that's part of the reason why I stay, because believe me, I've reconsidered it, where students come back and they see a familiar face and they feel at home. So I think that's the piece that if you want to build a district where of course, there's data and there's things we want to grow, we have to build a type of district where people want to stay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Goulet.
It's me.
I'm sorry, Representative Williams.
All right, no problem. Thank you both for your testimony. Yeah, I think the importance of what you both are talking about, like, can't be underscored enough, right? Like, these are the fundamental things of talking about the belonging of every student, which is why teachers become teachers in the first place. And I just think it's so commendable for both of you to be representing your communities and wearing as many hats as you wear and, fighting this fight. And I just want to say thank you for, again, showing up today. Thank you for your service. And I hope we can continue to try and get some progress done immediately, because the cost for students and for our communities is great if we don't. And I wish that the executive branch realized that and stop playing games with, the quality and health of our school communities. So thank you both.
Representative Goulet.
Mr. Donaldson, thanks for your service to Deal and sharing your powerful story with us tonight, your personal story, and I'm just so sorry to hear about the loss of one of our students. And I just appreciate you coming in despite all that, and just really grateful for your service on this. And we need to do better, on the issue of this contract. We need to get DCPS back to the table. The fact that teachers were not only here in person throughout the school year, but over the summer, trying to put this together, and we can't get DCPS to sit across the table from you to negotiate in good faith is extremely disappointing. It's very frustrating. I know the parents in Ward 3 are not going to be happy about this because of what happened last time on the contract, and then all the related cuts we saw to schools. Commissioner Morales, I just want to thank you for all your service to the city, and I think the way you described yourself as somebody who loves teaching in our city, who I know you serve as an A&C commissioner, you live right where you teach. I mean, that really is what we want. We want our teachers living in the communities they serve, feeling connected to the city and loving DC and loving the kids there, and building those relationships with families. And, the fact that, we're doing this, this really just erodes, I think, confidence, of our teachers and the system we have here in the city and their desire to stay. So I think what you kind of laid out is that's what we dream of, is having teachers living in our communities and just loving the city and feeling connected, and then wanting to stay their whole career working in DC and serving our kids. So it's frustrating that that everyone's being treated this way. And just lastly, you mentioned the climate crisis, which I think is so important. And we don't have a lot of actually formal powers up here. Even the resolution we'll vote on tonight is just a urging of the chancellor to get back to the table. But we do have powers within curriculum, and I would love to work with you and others on trying to create a curriculum that really is forward-looking and something that would really set the national bar high for educating DC students about the climate crisis, and looking at the facts and getting our students energized about what's going to be one of the biggest issues that they will face in their lifetime. So I really appreciate you raising that. I know we probably disagree on other issues, but on this one, we're on exactly the same side, and I'd love to work with you on this issue of really trying to get a curriculum in place that gets our students ready for the challenge that they will face on this issue. So sorry I didn't leave you guys much time, but I appreciate you coming in tonight and for speaking your minds and for your service to our city.
Vice President O'Leary.
Piece of advice for teachers who are younger than I am, all of you. Teaching is about small victories. Don't look at the big picture. It's about you're touching some child's life and changing that child's life. And that's what the small victories are about. That's why y'all are still teaching, all right? It's not about money anymore. It's not about the horrible building or anything like that. It's about getting to work every day and helping children become adults, all right? But the greatest satisfaction you get as a teacher, and I'm talking from my experience, which is over 50 years now, is when somebody comes and recognizes you in a store or someplace like that and say, Mr. O'Leary, you remember when? I don't remember when at all right? But you impacted somebody's life, all right? And Mr. Donaldson and Mr. Morales, I appreciate your testimony completely. I'm incredibly empathetic about everything that happens. Mr. Donaldson, you mentioned the others. And that's something that I think our system doesn't understand, is who are the others, all right? This is a room filled with the others, all right? That's one of my major themes while I'm still teaching, is reading about the others, all right? And that's what teachers do. They help the others. And that's why we need for the executive to understand how important teachers are and how the teachers are not backing down, all right? And I've been through 2 strikes back when teachers could strike. One of them worked and the other one didn't. And when it didn't, we lost money and whatever, all right? But we need to, and I know I'm not encouraging anybody to strike, all right? And I'm not encouraging a work stoppage because that would affect the children. But what we have to understand that teachers are the most important people in this city besides the children. And so that's what the executive branch needs to understand and needs to come to the table until a resolution is made, period. Thank you very much.
President Thompson.
So I'd like to start with Mr. Morales. From one elected official to another, thank you for your service. I know we have heard applause in the chamber tonight, but I also know there are many times where you are working and there's no applause. And I know that's not why you do it. And so I want to thank you for your time and energy. Mr. Donaldson, you tried to take me out on this dais tonight. I will say, I do feel blessed that you chose to share with us. Because I went around and I asked, was there anyone else who wanted to testify? And you said, I do. So thank you. I'm so sorry for your loss. They say you're supposed to speak from your scars and not from your wounds. And looking at you, I can feel how fresh that wound is for you. So I want to thank you for your grace and your power and your vulnerability this evening. I also want to tell you, when I look at you, the thing that I recall that I heard someone say once, it was a quick anecdote, and it was like, there was a person who was in a hole, and people walked by him, and he said, no, don't try to help me, you'll fall in the hole too. And there was somebody who threw down a ladder, there was somebody who threw down a rope, and then there was someone who jumped down in the hole with him. And he said, well, if I can't get out, then you can't get out. And he said, oh no, I've been in this hole before. I can show you the way out. And so I thank you, because I felt we watched someone try to use their identity to otherize and to weaponize. And that's completely unacceptable. So I thank you for using your identity to be a light for others and to create community. So I yield the rest of my time, but I'm eternally grateful for you sharing with us tonight.
Thank you both for your testimony tonight. Madam President, that concludes our list of witnesses for this evening.
Thank you.
So this is why they give me a script. I want to thank all our public witnesses for their comments tonight. We sincerely appreciate it. At this time, we are going to move to vote on the 1 state resolution and 3 ceremonial resolutions we have this evening. We will start with what I think you all came for, which is the state resolution. I'm going to look for a motion and second for each of the state resolutions, followed by Director Butler reading that resolution into the record.
Once the resolution is read into the record, we will have member discussion in 3-minute rounds of statements before roll call votes are conducted. We will now move to vote on State Resolution SR 23-13 on the timely settlement of contracts for the Washington Teachers Union and Council of School Officers. I'm going to look to Representative Goulet for the motion,
So moved.
and I'm going to ask, is there a second?
Second.
I don't know who got there first,
It's not a race.
but I think one of our two teachers gave it a second, proudly seconded it. So the motion has been properly moved and seconded, and sounds like also thirded. Director Butler will read the resolution into the record.
I'm nervous about teachers, so I have to make sure. State Board of Education resolution on the timely settlement of contracts for the Washington Teachers Union and Council of School Officers, SR 2313. Whereas the District of Columbia has one of the highest teacher attrition rates in the country. Whereas, in addition to broader retention strategies, school districts across the country continue to experience a shortage of teachers, especially in specific subject areas. Whereas, according to data from the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, public schools in D.C. have experienced staffing challenges with school year 2021 through school year 2024. Teacher vacancies being highest in subject areas such as elementary education, English language arts, and special education. Whereas on October 19, 2022, the DC State Board of Education approved SR 2210 on the timely settlement of the WTU contract, which urged a prompt resolution to negotiations between the Washington Teachers Union and the DC Public Schools to improve teachers' working conditions, maintain existing labor protection, and support teacher retention, thereby enhancing student educational experiences. Whereas in November 2022, DCPS and the WTU reached a 4-year agreement for fiscal years 2020 through 2023. Retroactively effective October 1st, 2019 through September 30th, 2023. Whereas the proposed resolution 2563, compensation and working conditions agreement between the District of Columbia Public Schools and the Washington Teachers Union, Local Number 6 of the American Federation of Teachers, approved resolution of 2023 was approved by the DC Council on February 7th, 2023. Whereas the WTU contract has expired, and beginning October 1st, 2023, DCPS teachers are again operating without a current contract approved in place. Whereas in October 2022, DCPS and the Council of School Officers, Local Number 4, American Federation of School Administrators, AFL-CIO, reached a 4-year agreement for fiscal years 2021 to 2024, retroactively effective October 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2024. Whereas proposed resolution 24991, compensation and working conditions agreement between the District of Columbia Public Schools and the Council of School Officers, Local Number 4, American Federation of School Administrators approved resolution of 2022 was deemed approved on November 11, 2022. Whereas for the fiscal impact of an approved contract to be included in DC's annual budget formulation for DCPS through the Uniform Per Student Funding Formula, the contract should be finalized by approximately January 1st of the fiscal year, before the proposed budget. Whereas the budget for DCPS is 82.4% personnel services, meaning the salaries, benefits, and other personnel costs negotiated through the WTU and CSO contract have a significant impact on the overall proposed budget for DCPS. Whereas for the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget, since WTU members have been without a contract for over 3 years and CSO for over 2 years, the corresponding increases in salary of over 12.5% for WTU and 8.5% for CSO meant the proposed DCPS increase of 5.8% represented the largest cut to the purchasing power of local DCPS schools in over 2 decades, with many schools across the District of Columbia initially facing 5% cuts. Whereas, since 2018, the State Board has maintained its commitment to improving teacher retention and will continue to advocate for school-wide conditions that support student learning, such as ensuring teachers have a fair living wage and adequate planning time, and ensuring schools are well-resourced. Whereas research shows that teaching longevity is positively associated with student achievement gains throughout a teacher's career, and that a teacher's effectiveness increases at a greater rate when they teach in a supportive and collegial working environment. Whereas the WTU represents over 5,000 current and retired teachers. Whereas members of the WTU testified before the State Board during their September 21st, 2022 public meeting, explaining their consequences of not having a renewed contract. Whereas the State Board has previously heard from WT members that an updated contract is needed to provide clear guidelines for addressing pandemic-related issues, including technology use, student mental health, family engagement, and more. Whereas DCPS teachers went without a contract for over 3 years, leaving them without a salary raise adjusted for inflation or unexpected costs during the pandemic. And with the contract once again expired, it is essentially that Chancellor Lewis Fairby promptly returns, it is essential, that Chancellor Lewis Fairby promptly return to the bargaining table. Whereas improving working conditions for teachers are essential to creating a safe, positive learning environment for students. Whereas a contract that ensures teachers receive the benefits and pay commensurate with their cost of living in the District of Columbia will contribute to teacher retention and stability for students citywide. And whereas a contract will allow DC to hire and retain teachers, which is essential to reducing unacceptable large class sizes at some DCPS middle and high schools, which teachers have cited as a significant factor contributing to reduced individual attention and instruction adversely impacting student performance, discipline challenges, and teacher burnout. Whereas a contract that ensures teachers have adequate time to plan thoughtfully is essential to student learning. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education urges a prompt resolution to negotiations between the Washington Teachers Union and the DC Public Schools to improve teachers' working conditions, maintain existing labor protections, enhance school safety, and support teacher retention, thereby enhancing students' educational experiences. And be it finally resolved, DCPS should reach multi-year tentative contract agreements with WTU and the Council of School Officers no later than January 1st, 2024 to ensure that the fiscal impact of these contracts is factored into the proposed fiscal year 2025 uniform per student funding formula, which will set the funding levels for the proposed budgets for DCPS and DC Public Charter Schools.
Thank you, Director Butler. Is there any discussion? Representative Goulet, Representative Reed. We'll start there.
I'm not going to belabor this. I just want to thank you all for coming down, for your powerful testimony today, and for your service to our city. I mean, you shouldn't have to come down here to ask for something that should just be done through the regular course of business, which is DCPS sitting down at the table, negotiating in good faith. And it's absolutely unacceptable we're back in this position again. I think what I'm going to try to do is reach out to our ANCs in Ward 3 and ask them to also pass resolutions similar to this. That was an effective strategy on the special education transportation that actually originated from the ANCs. So I'm going to reach back out to them. I know all my colleagues also have good connections with their ANCs, but it's time we ramp up the pressure quickly on this, because I'm really fearful that, given the limited amount of time we have right now, that we're going to miss the window for the next year's budget. And we just simply can't do that. We've got to get this budgeted before those local school budgets hit the LSATs across our city. We need to get this built in. and we can't get behind again. So just thanks for your advocacy. I'm sorry you have to be down here, and we'll do everything we can do to amplify this, including encouraging the council to hold a hearing on this, because we really need this to be front and center and get this done so we're not back in the same position we were last budget cycle. So thanks to you all, and we'll keep working with you every step of the way, and just call us when you need us.
So thank you all, and thank you, Representative Goulet, for drafting this much needed resolution. And I'm glad the board, even though we unfortunately have to take up this resolution again, I'm glad that we are. Previously, when I worked at DCPS early stages, I was a member of CSO. And I remember distinctly being a young speech pathologist as a clinician, and also a recent homeowner with that new negotiated contract, I believe at the time, or maybe I was just getting the benefits of it, the breath of the fresh air from getting back pay. The breath of fresh air, what they don't tell you as a speech pathologist, every December you pay about $500 to $700 in licensing fees that the contract was able to protect and make sure that was a thing. The pay equity in regards to knowledge and experience, as well as your education. All this to say those are all meaningful things, and I'm hoping that, and it was the reassurance of just being a professional and having that backing. So I hope that our city officials will come to the table as quickly as possible, because I know you all are here, and you have been there and you're doing the work. I also like to make sure I say things on mic, even though I can say them to this person's face anytime I want to. Ms. Fuchs, I have to thank you. I remember at one point you were like, "Are you a member of your union?" And I said, "Oh, wait, I don't think I am." So I have been a proud AFGE member for 2 years. And not the applause for the applause, but really for you really walking the walk and talking the talk and making sure that, basically standing what unions are meant for, and making basically be an education moment for me. So greatly appreciated. And I wanted to just say that on mic, even though I can catch you anytime and say it. So yes, I look forward to wholeheartedly supporting this resolution, and thank y'all for your time.
Further discussion?
I'd like to ask a point of clarification to Representative Goulet. If you could look at lines 34 and 35. I'm just not sure. My understanding is that would read to September 30th, 2023, not 2024. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding?
On this one, the Council of School Officers contract, I believe, goes through the next fiscal year, not the Washington Teachers Union contract. But we've got a little bit more time on that one. Now, what we need to do is make sure, though, that one is also renewed in the upcoming budget, because even though it hasn't expired yet, we only have about 2.5 months to agree to a contract with that union as well. And we want to make sure both of those are in the upcoming budget.
Got it. Thank you. And I agree with that as well.
Any further discussion? Going once, going twice. All right. I will say, and then I know we have to read the student statement. Do you have that, Representative Yarkin, or am I going to the?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. So I will repeat that I'm so sorry that we have to vote on this again. I hope it's not another 9 months to a year before it actually gets done, but we can't control that. And so I do appreciate you coming to the board for support. I appreciate Representative Goulet for the time and the energy drinks he put into this resolution, because he absolutely cranked it out. And I watched him have the conversation with President Pogue Lyons at the DCPS back to school party. I know she talked to the chancellor that day as well as many others. And I know that you all have been making your rounds, asking people to support you all on the new contract. So I thank you again for showing up, and how you have continued to show up everywhere. I will see you all with books, and I'm sure more pushes to get the contract done on the 31st. So I thank you for your partnership. and I'm hoping that our city can do a better job of partnering with you. I'm going to turn for the SAC statement now.
Thank you very much. My first time getting to do this. On Monday, October 16th, 2023, the Student Advisory Committee voted unanimously to approve SR 2313 on the timely settlement of contracts for the Washington Teachers Union and Council of School Officers. We strongly support Representative Goulet's interest in expediting the negotiation process and urging the District of Columbia Public Schools to the table. We look forward to continuing work with the board to bring student voices to the forefront.
All right, seeing no further discussion, the board will now move to adopt, seeing no further discussion, the motion is to adopt SR 23-13. Director Butler will call the roll for the vote.
Representative Villaflor.
Present. Sorry. Or aye, sorry.
Okay. Representative Yarkin.
Aye.
Representative Williams.
Aye.
Representative Chang.
Aye.
Representative Goulet.
Aye.
Representative Henderson.
Aye.
Representative Best.
Aye.
Representative Reed.
Aye.
Vice President O'Leary.
Aye.
President Thompson.
Aye.
SR 23-13 has been passed unanimously.
Okay, we'll see if the principals will be back, and if they can match you all's energy. Hopefully not. Hopefully they won't be, and we won't need to do that. All right, the board will now move to adopt a consent agenda for the ceremonial resolutions. Director Butler, please read the titles of the resolutions to be included in tonight's consent agenda.
CR 23-11, celebrating the Charles Sumner School 150th anniversary. CR 23-12, recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month. CR 23-13, celebrating Seed Public Charter School of Washington's 25th anniversary.
Are there any items that need to be removed from the consent agenda? Okay. If not, is there a motion to approve all of tonight's consent agenda items?
So moved.
All right. Is there a second? A motion has been made by Representative Williams. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you for the second, Representative Henderson. Having been properly moved and seconded, the motion is now open for discussion. Is there any discussion on the resolutions? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adopting the consent agenda. All in favor, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Perfect. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Members, are there any announcements or comments you would like to make before we adjourn? Okay, I will make two. One is to remind the public, I heard in Superintendent Grant's remarks, we have settled on dates for the engagement. Those dates are October 30th, November 13th, and December 4th. So please come out for the engagement on the report card. So that is one. The second announcement I have is on October 31st from 6 to 8 p.m. I am working with the Washington Teachers Union, in addition to a couple of civic associations, to sponsor a trunk or treat at Lot 6 of the RFK Fields. It is free and a safe alternative to trick-or-treating, given all of the unsafe things we have seen happening in our communities, but Halloween should still be fun and safe. So please, if you have little people, dress them up in costumes and come out. If you don't have little people, feel free to decorate your trunk. and come out and see me. Any other announcements? Vice President O'Leary.
The engagement on the 30th is live at the Martin Luther King Library at 5 o'clock. Is that right? Somebody? 6 o'clock. And the other two engagements on the 13th of November and the 4th of December are virtual.
All right. Okay. Seeing no further items, I am going to thank the members and the viewing public for their time tonight. As a reminder to our viewing public, the State Board will continue to hold its meetings in person, and we will next convene at our November 1st working session and followed by our November 15th public meeting. With no further business before the board, I would now entertain and welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Perfect. Thank you, Representative Henderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Ha, thank you. Second. All those in favor of going home? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or wherever you want to go. Okay, perfect. The meeting is adjourned at 8:29 p.m. Thank you.